Al Williams will be our facilitator this morning, and I'm going to just read a couple of things in his bio. He has been a resident of Michigan City, Indiana, most of his life, and has been married to Sonora. Al wrote this, okay, I didn't write it. So I'm trying to decipher all this. He's been married to her for 41 years. Is the father of two outstanding young men, Austin, who lives in Miami Beach, Florida, and Anthony, who lives in Yorktown, Indiana. His combined undergraduate and graduate experience spanned the years 1965 to 1974. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree with a concentration in business administration, sociology, and American history. During his undergraduate activity, he was involved in numerous activities, including the Black Student Union. He was president of the Student Leadership Group, Pruitt Leadership Group, and member and president of Mega Sci-Fi Fraternity. He received a graduate fellowship from the Department of Student Affairs and was assigned to the Office of Special Programs as a graduate assistant. During that time, he co-authored with Art Lax this freshman survival program, and he was a mentor to many undergraduate students. After his student status concluded, he continued to work with and for Ball State in many capacities. He participated in several College of Business Dialogue Days, volunteered for various activities with the Office of Admissions, member of the university's committee panels, supported with the Officer of Multicultural Affairs, former member of the Alumni Council, the Alumni Association Executive Board, the BSU Alumni Association, current member, the Board of Governors, the BSU Bracken Library, and currently a member of the Board of Directors of the Black Alumni Constituent Society. And of course, he's a great, great historian, as we can see by all of this. And if you Google Alan's name, Alan William Ball State, all of his information and pictures and newspaper articles will come right up. That's in Bracken Library. Everything you want to know and probably didn't want to know. So all of it's in there, and it comes up when you type up his name. So with that, help me welcome Alan Williams, and he will take us further.
All right, good morning once again. All right, we survived the first day, and I hope it was a fantastic day for a fantastic night for everybody last night. I truly enjoyed seeing so many old friends and faces, and taking the opportunity to just reminisce and laugh and smile and just have a good time with each other. Before we get started, I did want to say, give you a little bit of information on how we got started with the entire project. Throughout the years, I had just started throwing things into boxes, and before I knew it, I was starting to collect a lot of items, and we would bring them to the alumni reunions and put them on display. And it really was very, very popular in terms of the former students having an opportunity to look back on yesteryear and see themselves and take them back to some very good times for most of them. Long story short, we developed a relationship with the Ball State University Library Archives Department, Dr. John Straw, and made arrangements to digitize all of the information that I had. And the whole posture that I had taken was to chronicle the black student experience at Ball State. What I wanted to do was to make sure that the footprints that we made in so many various ways over the years were left for others to see and for others to follow. It was important that the legacy, the challenges that we as students, the challenges that the university went through, some of the changes in direction and philosophy, as a result of the black students attending Ball State was truly was evidenced. We have been so successful in so many, many ways both as undergrad, postgrads, and in our careers, and I didn't want that to be forgotten. I sort of borrowed the comment that was made by Carter G. Woodson in terms of black history when he said that if a people's history is not acknowledged, it will soon become negligible. And if it becomes negligible, it will soon be forgotten. And I didn't want that to happen, so as a result, started to work with a lot of other individuals to make sure that we did some things that would contribute to our lasting legacy. We followed that up working with Dr. Michael Doyle, and we did some oral histories last year. I think we did about 20 or so of those with Dr. Doyle under his direction and under his graduate team. And we thought we wanted to take that a little bit further this year because with the limited number of people that he was interviewing, and they were 2-hour interviews, it really didn't capture the true feelings and nature and thoughts of a lot of students. So hence Teresa and the rest of the Black Alumni Board thought this would be a great opportunity for us to provide that opportunity to a lot of people to speak to their personal situations, to speak to their personal perspectives, and just add to the overall commentary and about the legacy of the black student experience. So that's how we've gone from point A to where we are right now. And it's important that as we speak today that you all just say what's on your mind. Just say what's on your mind. As Teresa said earlier, we are going to be trying to provide everyone with an opportunity to speak. So we will have some sort of time limitations. And with that, we hope that we can go back a second and third time for people to speak again. And once we've had the opportunity, provided that opportunity for everyone else. There's a couple of documents that we laid on your chairs here. The first one is just a guideline. It really is just a guideline to hope generate some thought on some of the topics that might be germane to what we're doing today. And then the second one is a critical events, significant issues document that I had prepared a few years ago. And again, it's one person's perspective. It's a perspective of over 50 years of having a relationship with Ball State. So I think there is some validity to it, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other perspectives that others might have. But what I've tried to do is to pay homage to some of those events and some of those people and some of those times that really were part of the transformation and the growth and development of Ball State University. And as you look through that, you'll see that. And I start off with those pioneer black students who attended the university in the 30s and the 40s. Because if we don't recognize them, then we can't recognize anyone else. We have to talk to or speak to the fact that they were here during a very difficult time, not only as students, but in America. We just come out of the Depression, and so for African American students to have the wherewithal to attend Ball State and attend a school that is situated in Middletown was of significance. So if you read through that at your leisure, just take it for what it is. And if you'd like to add comments, please let me know that, because we will be adding some of those things to the archives also. So without further ado, I'd like to get started here. And there's always an icebreaker question that is needed. I don't want to look out at the crowd when we may not need any icebreakers. I can see some people saying, shut up, Al, so I can give me the mic, so give me the mic. But I'd like to throw out one just in general. For those who come up, I'd like for you to identify yourselves, obviously, because we are taping, identify the time frame that you attended Ball State, and then just speak to the experience that you felt that was most significant. So we'll start from there, and then as we go through, we'll mix it up, and we may go through some of the items that are on the guideline list here. So we have two microphones, one on the left, one to the right. It would be helpful if you came forward so everyone could hear you? Okay. Do I have anyone to start it out? Mr. William G. from California. All right. I know you guys can remember Mr. G, but he told me that he's been on a walking tour and he's lost over 100 pounds. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I enjoy walking, and I have been doing it for 4 years now, and I'm almost back to my Ball State weight. I came to Ball State when I got here in September of 1960. There weren't a lot of students for African American students at Ball State. And that particular year, I always say 60 was a great year. It's the year I graduated from high school, and it was also the year I came to Ball State. Nobody in my family had ever even finished high school. I think my mom finished the 3rd grade, and my dad finished about that same. So nobody had even in my family had even finished high school, and I was very fortunate to have some parents that really cared about my growing up and doing the right thing. So they encouraged me, and I had got a scholarship here to play football here at Ball State. So I really was very blessed and very fortunate. When I got here, like I said, I think the African Americans that came in 1960 literally doubled the population here at Ball State, African American population. I don't think there were 7 or 8 African Americans here at the time, and we had about 13 that came in to college that September. And I've tried to keep in touch with most of them. A couple have passed on, but most of them I still keep in touch with. And in fact, they come to visit me in California. But this experience was just a marvelous experience. I have never experienced college. I didn't have any idea what was going on, and it was right at the beginning of the civil rights movement. So we, thanks to Dr. Greg Williams, we were able to integrate the Pizza King, because you couldn't eat in the Pizza King. You could go in and buy their pizza, and they had a great pizza. I still love it. But you couldn't go in there and eat, sit down and eat. So we sent an undercover guy in first, and he got a seat and sat down, ordered his pizza, and then several of fraternity members from Kappa Alpha Psi came in and sat down, and they gave us a look like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm here to eat with my friend." Well, they didn't want to say we don't serve Negroes or African Americans. They just said, "You can't eat in here." I said, "Yes, we can. He's eating in there. Look at his driver's license. You know, he's African American, and you let him sit down and order, and he's at a table." So they, right after that, we were able to go ahead and sit down and eat at the Pizza King, and it was a pleasant experience. During August of '63, I had the privilege of going to Washington, D.C., and we took 5, we called ourselves the Commandos. We took 5 students from Ball State to Dr. Martin Luther King's speech on the Washington Mall. So we drove from Muncie. We were the Muncie Commandos, and we drove to Washington, D.C. And I think 2 or 3 reunions ago, there was a lady that came to the reunion, and we talked, and I didn't recognize her. I didn't remember. She said, "You know, I was in the car in your old Buick when we went to Washington, D.C., and I about fell off I said, "Are you kidding me?" Good gracious. I just didn't recognize her, and I knew there were 3 guys and two females, but I didn't remember she was one. Obviously she remembered because she said we did it. But my experience here at Ball State I think it was eye-opening. I didn't know what college life was like, and I really enjoyed it. And if I look back on it, and it's been 56 years since I left here, and I think the best thing that ever happened to me while I was at Ball State was that I met and married my wife, who was a native of Muncie, Indiana, and we've been married for 54 years, and they don't make them like that anymore, so I'm going to keep this one.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Jim. Dr. Brown. Dr. Mylan Brown.
And with those instructions there, I was standing where they're talking to some students. And you got phones everywhere, things ringing. And my cell phone went off, you know. I didn't know it was it. The girl said, that's your phone. And the girl said, Dr. Brown got a phone. So I'm old school.
Oh, good.
But I always seem to win. Old fool. But I came up last year and made a DVD for the archives. And that was quite an experience. And they asked me to talk about some things. Well, Dr. Hannaford brought me up here as a doctoral teaching fellow in 1965. And that was quite a beginning. And they didn't have a lot of black folk working on doctorates here, maybe 2 or 3. But I was the first Afro-American to get a doctorate in history. And so I'm from Ball State University. I'm the first. And that was 1968. And, but here, students, black students, they've had a lot of difficulty and their services were limited. And then one morning, when I got up, it was on the front page of the paper that Mylan Brown was leading the demonstration. I almost had a conniption. I said, "Boy, I never will finish now." Because I see there's a troublemaker. But Pam and Odell Brown, Brown Odell back there, and several others, they were there at the time, here at the time. But what was so wonderful is that the character that Dr. King talked about all the time. Forget about the color, forget the character. And then I started reading the letters that I had gotten from Dr. Farrell and Dr. Hamilton and Dr. Hannaford and Dr. Burkhart, who died about 3 years ago. And they were telling me what I had done at Ball State. But the thing about it is, the students at that time told me in an open letter. And I received a lot of honors and what have you. But that letter from those students, telling me what I had done for them, I keep trying to find something that would top that, and that's what tops that. And we started talking about it on campus. Well, between 65 and 80, a lot of turmoil everywhere at the universities. But at Ball State, when my crew got all fired up, they didn't ask the president to step down and resign. They did in Columbia, Missouri, a while back. But they had some fire ministers, so we marched downtown Muncie with a police escort. And I'm out front walking, you know, and the Delaware County Council churches back there, black and white, locked behind me, and I'm out front there. And I tell you, that thing brought the worst in me. But now, I mean, we'll go ahead, I'm fired up now. And then I put my name in the paper. Shame on you. But I'm out front there and saying, "Tell me why we want freedom. It's so good." I said, "What? It's so good. Tell me why we want freedom. It's so good. Good old freedom hood. Oh, miss, we rolled down from this camp downtown. And we just had a ball. Of course, next day I couldn't hardly talk. But that character thing of those students at that time, and I told them, see, Dr. King was assassinated in Tennessee, April 4, 1968. And by the time I got up here to the students here, and they heard about it, they wanted to raise some sand. So I was in the library, and somebody got me out there. I said, Brian, come out here, this quadrangle. These kids getting fired, they finna tap something. So I went out there and talked to them. I know Pam, they remember that. I talked to them, and then there was an old character in plain view. Nothing but quality. Intellectual, cerebral, thinking students. I said, okay, what you do? We do a petition. You put your grievances in a petition and give them to the administration. And that's what happened. You see, and I'm pretty sure some of the others I got from the administrator, like Dr. Fair, he will refer to that because when we did that, well then, they didn't tap anything. But we moved forward trying to get more benefit, more recognition, more programs, what have you. And that was a wonderful thing. And then the Delaware County Council of Church asked me to teach a course in the city out there called Focusing Black. I tell you, the racial tension around here, it was serious business. So I went out there and taught a class for several weeks called Focusing Black. And it was well attended. And then Mayor Lugar over in Annapolis, he was the mayor at that time. He would send students around to the colleges, talk about going to college, high school students. And a crew, they came to Ball State. So somebody called me and said, Brian, get a program together for those students coming here. I said, okay. So we got our program together. And a few weeks later, Ball State got a letter. From Mayor Lugar's office saying Ball State had the best program of any place that they had been, whatever. So that kind of thing was happening. At the same time, when those kids were raising sand down in Missouri a while back, I thought about walking from the campus down to the Anthony Apartments where the married people live. So I was walking down, it happens several times, but I'm walking, to the where I live down there, and some white students would come by on a car and say, hey, nigga, call you different names like that you see. So when I hear about this other stuff at Columbia, Ithaca, and what have you, I thought to myself, you don't know, my crew at Ball State went through all that, and I have too. And it continues. But to be here and experience that. And then I was invited back each time to the special program with Bob Cody. Each year he was over there. And that program, special program place over there, those kids were so happy and comfortable and everything, no tension and stress. And so that was a major program. That's why I was telling the people now, with this recognition, what have you, and the plaque that I asked for, and put all the kids on the plaque, then make sure Bob Cody is there, director of special program. I talked to him the other day, and he wasn't doing well. He couldn't get up here. He said, Brian, I'm sort of thinking about making a move around, what have you, but I'm doing all right. I said, okay. But Bob Cody was something special. I met him. He played varsity football. The first time I saw him, he was out on the field. I met him. Of course, the rest is history. Now, when it comes to the teachers themselves, my wife and I was in Georgetown, the suburb of Washington, D.C. Dr. Hannaford, who had invited me here, what have you, they told me in the letter. It's over there in my book, in that file. Went by there. And Dr. Hannaford had taken a leave from Ball State, went to D.C., worked in the Treasury Department. Anyway, we were sitting up there talking and everything, and he said, there was one professor on my committee that had some negative, talk. He said, well, we didn't worry about that because he was outnumbered. He was just one person. And then he was going to tell me the name of the person, and during the so I didn't ring the bell or something. I said, Lord, I'm rascal. You're going to tell me who that professor was on this campus. But as a whole, I had a village. You see, it takes a village to raise a child. But that same thing in the graduate school. When those professors, they know what's right, know what's wrong, and they don't have any issue with people want to move forward, what have you. So like Dr. Hamilton, you got to read the letter. He put it there, it's over in that book. And Dr. Fair, I said, boy, I didn't know I did all that. I thought the students had to talk about that. And Dr. Burkhart, I still heard he was ill. Sight was bad, but he died about 2 or 3 years ago. I got letters from all those individuals. And you talk about a village, it looked after Brown. And I can tell that the things that the Afro-American students did, like Pam and the crew and Odell, they appreciated that because, to me, that's very important. There's so much strength there, and the students that come here in the future, they need to understand that. They need to understand that. They need to go over and look at that plaque over there, what have you. And then when Jackie Maddox passed, I had told my college roommate, I sat down in that young lady was at Ball State, her name is Jackie Maddox. And then it found out that she was a CBS anchor woman down there. Also, I couldn't understand it. How many folk come to Ball State, black, white, blue, green, and become an anchor for CBS News? Great day in the morning. Oh, I tell you, I'm glad I wasn't a drinking man. But I had to get me something to settle my nerves. I was so excited. But when she passed, at 44, young, my buddy called me. He sent me the obituary, what have you. So when I graduated April 1968 from Ball State, doctoral teaching fellow, and it's all there because of my students. Some of them sit out there now, what have you. And I think about one of those doo-wop songs that I play sometime. And he said, I want to pay you back. I want to pay you back for loving me. Well, again, that's a two-way street. And still, there's a lot of work to be done at Ball State, what have you. But I want to do what Dr. Thomas did, a black dentist over there. And they were very good to Ball State. And one of those things out on the wall, I think he gave on that thing out there, like $10,000, I believe. I was trying to find it a while ago. So I told him, administration, Dr. Purcell stopped by to see me last year. He was down in the front. He came out by door to see me because I'm going to give some money, and it's going to be for scholarships. For the students that want to come here, for scholarships. And then last but not least, I regret that David Letterman, who was at the same time, 65, we enrolled at the same time. Then later on, I was gone, but Stedman was here. And somebody, they don't have a clue as to why Ball State did not become a Kent State, South Carolina State. Because South Carolina State, 3 black students were killed there. I used to be an apartment chairman there, and then, what you call them, when it comes to Kent State, the students were killed. And Dr. Chambers, who got his doctorate, by the way, Leo Krakowski died not long ago, and a year later, Marty's wife died. They were good friends of mine. And then they got 2 daughters. One is in Minnesota, and Sarah's in Cincinnati. And they want me to come and teach for them sometime. But he died one year, and then Marty died the next year. So I went to see Sarah, and then she got some cute children, what have you. And I showed her pictures when they were little girls, and they were sitting in my lap out there at the Anthony apartment. But Ball State was such a good place, but we have to stay true to the journey and continue to work because you see racism forever. You know, and when these tragedies happen, these people get killed, we come in a circle, and we have that prayer thing, what have you. And if you all do what the prayer says, the content is not worth a quarter. You see, that cycle keeps going. The cycle, every time, every year, the big shots up there talking or what have you. But I want them to be like my students here, especially Afro-American students, you see. And recently 2 people got in trouble to kill, trying to sell something without a license, what have you.
Dr. Brown,
Huh? I'm all done.
No, you're not done. We won't give you an opportunity to come back, but I do want to go ahead and probably extend out to some of the other folks right now. A couple of things that Dr. Brown said. One, Jackie Maddox. Started to do some research on Jackie Maddox, and you'll see a folder over there with some information about her. Also trying to connect with the communications department so we can get some recognition for Jackie as being one of the first African-American female anchors in the United States. She was at WAGA in Atlanta. Prior to that, she was in Nashville. The other thing I did want to cut Dr. Brown off is because he doesn't know this, but we're supposed to do a phone interview with Bob Cody this morning. And that's supposed to take place in just a few minutes, Dr. Brown. So it wasn't out of disrespect to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure that we were in preparation to make that call. Bob has been such an integral part of the university in so many different levels that we would be remiss if we didn't reach out to speak with him this morning. Liz, you wanted to?
Just a few minutes.
Okay, okay. We got a few minutes.
Dr. Brown mentioned my name, I just thought I'd follow him very quickly. Can you hear?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
So I want to bring up some highlights of my wonderful tenure here at Ball State.
Name?
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Year?
Everybody knows me. I'm Liz Odell, and I came in 1966, and I'm honored to have graduated in 1970. And Elizabeth Brown, and I was Dr. Brown's namesake while we were here. So I want to talk about a couple of experiences when I came at Ball State. I came to Ball State because family members lived in Muncie, Indiana, and that's why I came. So it was due to family, not because of Ball State's wonderful reputation, but family. The Richardsons, and some of you may know Myron Richardson, but those are old family friends. One of the things that occurred, and I remember, is when Martin Luther King died. That left us all with grief beyond belief. And we as black students felt that the university should be closed. It was not. So we as black students, we walked into the president's office and demanded that the university be closed. And we just stayed there and stayed there and stayed there. And we had those conversations. Those were tense times. And I don't know if you remember those times. Another incident that sticks out in my mind is the recognition that Dr. Emmons had. It was his farewell in the auditorium. And we wanted everyone to know that we were dissatisfied on the campus. And so we were dressed up in our finest.
There we go.
We walked in and we sat. If you've been a member of the auditorium, we sat in the middle of every row. Every row, there would be two of us. Think about that. And when they introduced him, we stood. The person to my left turned to their left. I turned to my right, and we said, "Excuse me," to every person as we exited that auditorium. We made a statement that day. Now, we did other things. We marched and so that sidewalks could be in Whiteley because they didn't have sidewalks, and we felt that that community deserved to have sidewalks like the rest of the community. We marched when the KKK came for Easter to Muncie. Those are my memories. But it is the Black Student Union that reminded me of how I came here, why I'm here, why I come back year after year after year. We began coming together in 1971 in Whiteley. We weren't recognized by the alumni, but we came together because we had a sense of family. And that is the underpinning of my relationships here, is a sense of family. And so for the young students who are coming, Take the time to get that good education, because Ball State does deliver a wonderful education, but take the time to connect.
Right.
We have social media now, and we don't connect with each other. Take the time to connect. It's meaningful. After all, it's our relationships that live on day after day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Liz. Thank you. The walkout that Liz refers to, we had been butting our heads against what seemingly was a wall with Dr. Collier and Dr. John R. Emmons. And so at that point, the BSU decided there needed to be some drastic actions. That is documented with the original documents. Connie Bentley was our recording secretary, and we have the handwritten sheets. We have the mimeograph sheets with the instructions from our meeting. Those are actually from that time period. They are over there in the book. Also, there are the newspaper clippings, the one that says that the walkout was correctly timed. And there is another one that refers to why we did what we did. And this was not written by African Americans. This was written by people that were part of the staff, part of the university structure. So it was a very critical point. So at this point here, are you going to? Not yet? Okay. Mr. Wiley Wells? I tried to give Wiley that $1 that I took from him years and years ago. You know, he says I took all his money shooting pool, but
More than $1. And it was on more than one occasion. I think I'm the second worst pool shooter in the world, and I don't know who the worst is, to tell you the truth. Anyway, my name is Wiley Wells. I graduated in 1970. It should have been 1967 because I entered Ball State in 1963. But I was kind of reluctant to leave, evidently, so I stayed around a while. Yes, there were several of us that were reluctant to leave. I'd like to address some of the questions that Al has provided because I can get a little focused doing it that way.
okay.
One of the reasons that I came to Ball State, the primary reason was that I grew up in South Bend, and I had several teachers that had gone here. And when there were discussions about colleges, they kept mentioning Ball State, Ball State, Ball State. So that's why I came to Ball State, and I was the first of my family to attend college. Back then, the expectations were get out of high school, get a job, go to the factory, and live a good life. But this was kind of a seminal event in my community that I went off to college because it was a real big deal. I lived off campus, and the reason I lived off campus was because I was unprepared to be on campus. I applied and been accepted in a timely fashion, but I didn't do anything after that. So after a couple of days, it was a couple of days after school had started, I told my mother, I think it's time to go to college. And she said, okay, you're going to get your butt out of here, so get in this car and let's go to Ball State. So I arrived at Ball State after school had started. No money, no books, no housing. And the first person I saw on campus was a young lady named Linda Ralston.
Yeah.
And we were in the sidewalk next to the administration building, and I'm from South Bend, big city, and I got it going on. I'm smooth. So I said to Linda, can you tell me where the administration building is? And she said, oh, sure, it's about 12 feet to your right. so I never recovered from that, really. The influence of living off campus provided me with more contacts and more friends. I was part of the Muncie community and part of the Ball State community, which was a good thing because I got a perspective on the total realm of life. College students, people worked in factories, people doing all kinds of other things, small businesses. So I think that was really a positive for me. I was involved in a fraternity, member of Kappa Alpha Psi. Yes, Bill G was one of my influential persons that I met. And how did how do I perceive the role of black Greek organizations? Foster Stevens and I talked the other night. Back then, it didn't seem like we had as much animosity toward other Greek organizations. One of my best friends was Al. We were in different fraternities. Foster, and we seemed to do things together. And I contend maybe we didn't need fraternities because we were all at the same place all the time. There were only so many places to go. So we were there. I used to pile people in my car and go to the after set and things like that. So, but one of the things we did was service. And Foster was saying maybe the fraternities ought to do more service. And I can remember Brian Settles, one of my big brothers, he took us over his house, and after giving us some hands-on instructions, as you might want to say, he took us out to his mother's church, and we painted her church. Took a day and provided us some food, and that's some of the kind of things that we ought to be doing. And I thought that was good. I'm going to give you a different perspective on the question about whether the university was prepared for black students. And I think this is a problem that we have nowadays. As a minority, you have to be prepared to adopt to the university somewhat. You maintain your identity, but you can't stand and say, this is my position, and everybody has to come to my position. I think that's where we have. You see that in the political arena. Everybody has to move some. So I think we need to keep that in mind, and that relates to respect the other person's position. So as far as the university being prepared for us, I don't know. I wasn't prepared, but it took me 7 years, and I think that kind of worked out. What was the most significant issue confronting black students? Finances. Definitely finances. I fed a lot of student athletes on Friday nights. I was working in a factory. They didn't have money to do anything, even on scholarship. They didn't feed them in the dorms on Friday night, so they were actually hungry. And couldn't go on a date, couldn't get their clothes clean, things of that nature. So finances, that's a big deal. As far as what the university role, they provided financial assistance. That's the way I got through, so I appreciated that. Do I feel that Ball State provided a quality education? Absolutely. Absolutely. Hands down. Since I went back to school, got 2 graduate degrees, I was prepared. So absolutely. I call it no frills education. You go out there and you do the job, and you can be successful in life. And I don't have any problem with the educational level here. Would I attend Ball State? Yes, I would, if I had to do over again, because it was great. I looked at the campus, toured the campus the other day, and walked around. It's hard to recognize. Toured the communication center, the David Letterman Communication Center. It's as high tech as anything I've seen in industry. Yes, I would be back here. I'd have some concern about being able to compete with the students because they were certainly smarter than I was, but yes. What was the most important thing to happen to you while at Ball State? The most important thing to me was graduation and then setting the tone for my family. That set the expectations whereby when I was growing up, I had an advantage of being in an inner city school, and I was one of these quiet kids. And they always said, you're a good kid. Well, I wasn't good. I was scared. We had something back then called corporal punishment. And it was at home, let me tell you. And it kept me in line until I started to be able to think for myself. So, yeah, since I got a couple graduate degrees, I've had nieces that got PhDs, other lawyers, so forth. And it's now an expectation to go to college.
There you go.
Not an exception.
That's
so
right.
that's the most important thing.
Right.
And what is your present perception of my Ball State experience? I kind of summed that up. But the most influential thing on us, and when I was in Ball State, was Vietnam. And my understanding is that we have a lack of black male students, a small number. Vietnam kept us in school. Yeah. And so negative, positive, whatever you want to see, but whatever you want to say. But we need to keep these students in school. And one of the things that really, Dr. Mylan Brown was my second black instructor. And I only had 2 black instructors in my life. And that seems kind of strange coming from the inner city. He was an assistant to Dr. Rosenberg. And I saw him, and I said, oh, this is great. We don't realize what we're doing, the example that we're setting for people. And people are watching us. Younger people are watching us. And so it's up to us to set the example. Dr. Brown set the example. And my final word is, I grew up in South Bend. Notre Dame had outreach programs. One of the guys that came out to our to our recreational center, I live right next door to it, and I was the ping pong champion because I live right next door to it. Dick Gregory's brother, Ron Gregory, was a track star there. And he'd come out, he'd look me up, and I'd just kill him. I'd beat him past to death playing ping pong. But he was so cool. He took that beating really nice, and the way he spoke, the way he carried himself was influential. So people are watching us, so remember that. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Warren. That is so true. People are watching us. Can I get Ms. Sandra Parker? Oh, wait just a second. She's getting a connection with Bob Cody here.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the speakerphone. All right, we have Bob Cody on the phone, so he's going to have a few remarks. All right.
If you didn't hear, Bob Cody's going to be on the phone. He'll be making some remarks to us.
All right, we're ready.
Hello, Ball State.
Hello. Hey.
Wish I were there with you all. I know you're going to have a good time and have already started doing that. I am going to try to very briefly tell you about my contact with Ball State University. As most of you know, I'm from Muncie, and so I grew up there. And my first contact with Ball State was probably seeing some athletic contests, seeing the great Timmy Brown, Nat Pittman, John Walker, Bill G, playing football there. Basketball, Ed Butler and others that I got a chance to see. But my first class at Ball State was a voice lesson. Had a high school teacher that encouraged me to go out to try to learn how to sing. And every now and then as a student, I would, if I had an elective to spare, I'd go back over in the School of Music and give that a try. Ball State became my first choice in terms of colleges over Indiana University, Butler University, and Kentucky State. I didn't hear from IU. I did hear from Butler. They offered me an athletic scholarship, full ride, but I kind of figured that I'd come to Ball State because Ball State, I thought, would have better teams in the future. Kentucky State, I didn't exactly know where Kentucky State was, and when I talked to my high school guidance counselor about it, he didn't have a clue. So, kind of missed out on that, but Ball State was my best choice. I'm glad I went there. As a student athlete, I played on one of Ball State's 2 unbeaten football teams. I'm always rooting unbeaten, to go to bowl games. They were down here in the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, Florida area a couple of years ago. And when I saw they were going to be there, we were right there cheering for them. In playing in a bowl game, I think one of the first the Ball State played in, we played Tennessee State. We were both unbeaten. And in those days, if the regulation time ended and you were tied, they left the games like that. So we both left unbeaten with one tie. As an undergraduate student, there was at least one doctoral student who came along and found time to spend time with students and interact. And his name was Dr. Mylan R. Brown. And he became a friend, someone you could talk to. And later on, when I had the opportunity to work at Ball State, we were able to get him to come back and speak to us and to be involved, to continue his involvement with Ball State. Having jumped ahead like that, I did not begin working at Ball State in special programs, now multicultural programs, without hearing from Bob Foster. And Dr. Bob Foster called me and invited me to come and interview. And I became an assistant director to him. I learned much from him. He was a great mentor. And because it was a great opportunity to start to work at the college level. The budget was slim, so creativity was necessary. But even more than that, student participation and student involvement was very, very important. In other words, student support. Many of the programs that we came up with were in response to what was going on or what was not going on campus. Just to give you an example, I remember a couple of students saying, well, by the time we end the quarter, it's so close to Christmas until when we get home, it's so late we never quite get into the Christmas spirit. And so hearing that, we began to work with students to put together an annual Christmas party there in the house. And it was complete, not just the tree and good food, and you all know we had good food, those of you who were there at that time, but it was even complete with Santa Claus. And I didn't have to play Santa. We had good healthy students like Al Balders and folk who could play. I could do it now because I'm slim, fit and trim, but I said then, no, I had to lose some pounds. I'm not going out and being Santa Claus just because I'm over 200. But more so than that, one of the things that ties in, I think, to your presence there today in the reunion, the alumni reunion, is a couple of activities that we did. Since I lived in Muncie and I had to be there at homecoming time, I started trying to get alumni to come back for homecoming, black alumni. And so, while everybody didn't want to see Red Skelton in Emmons Auditorium at 8 o'clock, and some of the other people began to try to develop a program. So come go to the football game. You know, we'll set up a fifth quarter rally, a social hour after that. And then as I talked to alumni, they wanted to go back. They wanted to come back and go back to the Debonaires Club. Anybody there remember the Debonaires Club?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So so we would dance there for a while. And so that was one of the activities where we begin to make the contact with alumni. Another one was a career alumni workshop where we thought it important that Ball State alums understand that the education that they were receiving prepared them and prepared them very well. You didn't have to hear IU or Michigan State or talk to somebody from those schools and then start to shake in your boots. As a matter of fact, by being on the quarter system, I talked to alumni that had, say, some of the business courses, and they said things that had been covered in their series of courses. Some people had to take 2 or 3 semesters to have an equivalence of what they had received at Ball State. So that let me know that we were on the right track to have alumni coming back. And it was somewhere after that that the assistant dean indicated to us that, well, we were directed, to work with alumni because in other words, that career activity was kind of stepping into placement in the career office. The alumni workshop, I guess, was seen to get into the alumni bit a little bit. And so about the time that I made a departure to go to the University of Louisville was the time that Ed and other alumni were beginning to work on having a return event. And again, it was students and alumni who stepped up to the plate to say that they wanted the kind of activity that leads to or led to what you're doing today. I would probably have retired at Ball State, but some of you remember that we, at the Special Programs House, Multicultural House, we used to open at 8. We might close at 5, and we'd open to, say, 6:30 to 9:30, Monday through Thursday, because we wanted people to have a place to study and to function and to do things. Really wanted that library, the Malcolm X Memorial Library, to be utilized day and night, and the whole facility. And that's why we made it so colorful and everything. One night I returned to work that evening shift with a grad student, and while I was on the front porch, I heard one of the students going forth explaining to those in the gathering, I don't think it was a formal meeting, just maybe an informal meeting, how that people like Bob Foster and myself were there because we couldn't get a job anyplace else. Nobody wanted to hire us, so we were just there, and maybe he was trying to let them know that progress or lack of progress being made was being held up by them. That stayed with me and never said a word to the student about it because I knew that wasn't true. I knew we were good at what we were attempting to do. All we needed was the budget to do it. But what I did continue to do is that I would look and more even at other programs. And then that also caused me, well, maybe I should interview and see. I mean, I'm from Muncie. My family is here. Can I handle it out in the real world? And while interviewing out in the state of Iowa at Iowa State, I learned about the Black Alumni Association, the gathering of students, that they were doing things. And so it was on my agenda and I've stayed there, that was something I wanted to do, and I looked forward to working with alumni to get it done. as I departed and went to the University of Louisville, Linda Wilson, who had been one of the students and graduate assistants and alumni, worked in multicultural programs, was working with me at the University of Louisville. So she began to come back for the meetings. And the only reason I didn't come back is I didn't think it was maybe a good idea for my supervisor to call and find that the two top people in the office were gone to Ball State to do things. So I told her I had great faith in her that she could handle it and work with the other alums and Ed to get things done. And you have made great progress today. The thing that needs to happen is that you need to continue to do this. I don't know, I'm not looking out on the group, but I always took great joy in seeing folk who were veterans who were there when I was a student, but I took a special delight in seeing individuals who had just graduated 1 year, 2 years, or whatever, that were new alums being there. But I would just say to you that whatever you do, you need to continue to find a way to keep the wheels turning, to get all kinds of alums involved. One other thing from the past that I must tell you, is Sue there this morning?
Yes, she is.
Okay. I tip my hat to Sue. I tip my hat to you, Teresa, and many others. I don't see who's there. So I won't call names, but Sue Detmer, at that time was Sue Detmer. Sue was working in alumni, and I was keeping, when I was contacting the students, the names that I had of alumni, because I would always check with you all and ask you when I talked to you, what's your address? And I would turn in the names that I had. Somewhere around here, I've still got a card file, the old Rolodex card file with names of alumni in it. Old addresses, maybe your parents' addresses. But everything that I had, I gave to her. And at one point, she decided to go elsewhere. And she explained to me how she had computerized that list. And one day after she was gone, I called alumni. I was asking about it. And the person that I was talking to informed me they didn't have a list of black alumni. The person went on to explain to me that that was not legal. Having graduated from Ball State and worked for the State Civil Rights Commission and EEOC, I had learned that that was not the case. You can keep tabs and track of race when you're doing it for affirmative reasons. So I politely explained that to him and encouraged him to pull up my name, because at that time, Sue, I think in some way, computer-wise, had attached all of the names we had of black alumni to my name, computer-wise. And when he did that, those many, many, many names popped up. And so we never lost out in Sue's absence and in Sue's return. And I'm glad that she returned. So those are the things that I've been talking a while, so let me just stop.
Well, we appreciate you being available to speak to us this morning, and certainly your name was raised a couple of times, and so we are glad that while you're not here in body, you're certainly here in spirit, so we appreciate your comments.
Yes, and I'll be writing down the date when you set it for the next one. It'll be my intention to be right there.
Great. All right.
Hey, Bob, this is Alan Williams. Can you hear me?
Al?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you so very much for taking the time out this morning to speak with the fellow alums that are here. And I wanted to also thank you for your tenure in so many capacities, but specifically as the Assistant Director of Special Programs and all of the contributions that you and the staff at the House made. I had the opportunity to sit down with you and Dr. Foster and become a graduate assistant at the House, and it was probably one of the most meaningful experiences that I've ever had. And under your tutelage, I learned so very, very much about so many, many things, and it's allowed me to carry that on over the years with the university. So we appreciate you speaking with us this morning. And one commercial. I'm still waiting for your contributions to the archives because those are probably the most comprehensive that we'll find. So, but I wish the best to you and your wife and family, and hopefully you'll be able to join us at the next reunion.
Yes. Thank you for the reminder. Did I send you a small package at all?
I don't think he got it.
No, I didn't.
If you
I
did.
didn't get anything.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I've got some more relocating to do. I've got some things that I need to find.
Okay.
When I retired from FIU here in Florida, I brought home some boxes. I have some Ball State things in that. When I moved here, I brought things with me from Ball State. And so it's a matter of getting the courage to attack those boxes. But I hope to move from here soon. And before I do that, I must do that.
Okay.
Because I want to share all of those things with you and the fine work that you're doing. And thank you for consenting to join Bob Foster and myself as a graduate student. You did an outstanding job, one of the mature students there at the time, and those are happy memories for me.
There are happy memories for so many students that came through that period. So you all made a difference, and just want to say again, thank you so very, very much. And you mentioned a lot of people that are here this morning: Dr. Brown, Bill G, Greg Williams is here. A lot of folks from that period. And
one I didn't mention, I think might be there. One of the senior students, Al, from your era and my era. That would be one of the students that I think was there from like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. That would be Wiley Wells. Barrister Wiley Wells, also known as Walt Brennan.
I'll pay the postage, Bob. Just in the package. You just too cheap.
He said he'll pay for the postage. He said because you're too cheap. That's from Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Senior Wells.
We're going to let you go because we got a lot more people that want to speak, and we have about an hour and a half to go, I think. So
Okay,
thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, great young man. And on the corner over there, I've started to put together something that's more focused towards special programs. Dr. Foster and Bob Cody. Speaking to my experience, and Linda was a graduate assistant, also worked for special programs. There is a document in there that Bob Foster wrote that addressed the purpose and the objectives of special programs. And one of those was the experimental programs that took place within that office that were very, very meaningful and very, very purposeful for the university. And I'll just use as an example, Art Lex and myself wrote a program called the Freshman Survival Program. And I was sitting with Ed Shipley one day and looking at Freshman Connections. And I said, that looks familiar. And I went down, I saw another point, and I said, okay, that looks familiar too. You know, but that was the whole point. That was one of the focus points of special programs, in addition to the home away from home that it provided for so many African American students. They were delving into a lot of issues that people were not aware of, special study programs for the disadvantaged, women's programs, a lot of things that people were just not really overtly aware of that were taking place within that era. So without further ado, we'll move forward. I think I left off with, I'm sorry, Phil, I called her first.
Good thing we have a script.
No, you don't have to follow the script, you know.
Well, I'll try to, so
Okay.
I won't take too much time, but I'm sure I looked at all these questions.
Now, you know this is Sandy Hall Parker when she says she won't take too much time.
Okay, I lied.
If you can remember the reunion we had a few years ago where she spoke about an hour and a half, you know. So, no.
Was it really?
No, I'm just joking.
Lord, okay. There you go. Okay, there was a tall person up here last week. Okay. First of all, I want to say I had a good time. I acted a fool. And I don't know how I graduated from this school. No. Now, realistically, I want to say just like I had a good time, I also pulled some long, late nights. And I had to, because I was determined that I was not going to go home and not be a graduate of Ball State University. The reason that I came to Ball State, I came down here with two other very good friends, Pat Zetta Jackson and Ray Young, who's Pat Zetta Trice and Ray Quarles now. Pat Zetta had an older sister here, Hiawatha Michelle Jackson. And she made sure that when we came during homecoming weekend, that she had three gentlemen, and I mean gentlemen, to watch out for her three girls, and she told them that they better take good care of us, which they did, and they were gentlemen. They were probably the last of the three. No, I'll take that back. But they were three very nice gentlemen that looked out for us. So that was why we came to visit, and all three of us decided that we were going to come to Ball State, and all three of us did graduate. Now, one pledged Delta, and that was Pat Zetta. Her sister was a Delta. And Ray and I pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha. And while I'm on that route, though, I just want to say that was one of the most special things while I was here at Ball State, because I've made lasting friendships. And my best friend, we are still best friends. I was in her wedding. I stood up for her. She stood up for me. We still keep constant contact. And I was just with her at Boulay in Atlanta, roommates again. So that was very special. And as I look out in this audience at my other sorors, I feel like God placed you in my life during special times. Because Dorothy May, she was already gone when I came. But she and I ended up working together. My first job as a teacher at School 75. And not only working together, but she took me home each evening, picked me up. Why? Because growing up a poor girl in Indianapolis off of 34th and Clifton, even though I had a good job, I wouldn't buy a car right away. I wanted to have a good down payment. So Dorothy would pick me up, and she'd take me home and charge me very little. And I would warn her sometimes that when those guys on the corner of 34th and Clifton yelled at them, just wave, you know, because I knew those rugged guys, and they were all right. But you need to speak, or else they might think you too stuck up to say hi in the hood. So, told you why I came here. My first impression of the university was not too many of us. But thank goodness I went to Northwest High School in Indianapolis as one of the first blacks. So I knew how to handle myself with different cultures. And I felt like, I'm going to be all right. I'm not going to let anybody intimidate me. And I also loved the closeness of all the blacks on campus. It didn't matter what sorority or fraternity. Yes, when we did lines, we might call you out and say something crazy. But when it came to party, we didn't stay away from each other. We all partied together, and we had a good time. And that's why I had to stay up late nights sometimes to make sure I got the studying in as well as the partying. Because I didn't miss too many parties, did I, Al?
No.
And I remember you had a lot of good ones. So anyway. So my first impression was that the blacks on campus were really friendly. I felt the university could have done a lot more to help us, but in a way, by them not helping us, those that made it, we became stronger. That's just what I feel. That if you had to make it here at Ball State and you made it, you had a good education and you were strong when you finished.
That's right.
My major started out social work, but I had an Aunt Zoe, who also ended up being our grad advisor here on campus, who talked me into changing it to education. The reason why, she said she had been a social worker and then wanted to get in the school system. And she said, I dealt with the worst of the worst. She said, juvenile delinquents and everything. And they made me go back to school, do my, what you do with like an intern, student teaching. She said I had to do all that in order to get into the school system to be an assistant dean. She said, you would think that my social work degree. She said, but it didn't. So you get your education license. I don't always listen, but I listened to her, and I thank God that I did. Because not only did I enjoy being a teacher and then being a homeschool advisor, but I love more than anything being a wife and a mom. And so every time my kids were out of school, I was out of school because I still like to play and be young. So I wanted to play and be young with my kids. And so I'm glad for that advice because that's what I love most. And even when they talk to me on my job about moving up into administration and doing this and doing that, I said, look, I'm not being nice to you so I can move up. I'm just a nice person. I don't want to go any further because if I do, I have to give up too many weekends, summer, everything else. I like it just like it is, and I'm nice because I'm nice. So forget anything that you're trying to do for me. I don't want it. So my major, as you know, was social work. I switched it. I lived on campus my first 3 years. My last year, my address is terrible. Nobody could forget it. It was 123 High Street. Now, that's not what we were doing up there, but that was the name of the street. And like I said, I was a poor girl, so I didn't have transportation. So I'm going to stand up here and say thanks to Valerie and Larry Hines, because without them, no telling what would have happened to me, because I would try to hitch a ride to campus every morning. And they saw me one morning and said, don't do that anymore. We will pick you up every morning and make sure you get there safely. So I love them so much for that. And Valerie's a Delta. So it doesn't matter. We all loved each other here at Ball State. We didn't talk about each other, but we still loved each other. And so I do remember one time I tried to make the Kappa punch. And it didn't turn out well for some of us. So Valerie, what'd you say?
They drank it anyway.
Well, Valerie started talking about the AKA so bad that night, and the next day people said, think that's your friend? I said, yes. Aren't you mad at her? I said, no. They said, why not? I said, because I messed that punch up, for one. And for two, Valerie gets me to class and makes sure I'm safe every morning. I am not going to get mad because she said something about our sorority. I said, she looks out for me. So I wanted to tell that story. Lived off campus the last year, and Valerie and Larry made sure I got to class. Yes, I was involved with Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. I got pink and green in these gray shoes. I'll be wearing pink and green the rest of the day. So, yes, I love my sorority. I will say that I'm glad some things have changed with sorority, though, because you stayed online too long and it interfered with making the kind of grades that I really would have preferred to make. And some of the things were ridiculous, but it did build some strong friendships. I'll just say it like that. And I'm glad some things have changed. I do think, though, that the community service was great. And one of the fun things was Vanna Lounge one year. And I didn't know my sorors loved me that much, the way they treated me when I was online. But they selected me to be the pink bunny. And, and that was a highlight. And all the rest of them had the black leotards, and I had the pink leotards. And it's always a fun thing, you know, that joke where you tell two lies and the truth. Every time I say I was a bunny, everybody thinks that's a lie. I said I was a Playboy bunny once, and somebody said, no, you didn't do that. They all know me as the nice church lady, so they always say, no, that's not the truth. And then when I show them the picture, they say, oh, I said, but it was for a good cause. It was for my sorority. It was fundraisers. I said, and the vodka was actually Sprite, and the rum was actually Coke, because we couldn't have any alcohol on campus. And they said, oh, okay, well, we forgive you for that. So that was a fun thing I remember. I also remember them telling me that the English class was a flunk-out class for black students. And I had this professor that they told me, you got him. And I was so proud of myself because my first paper, I ran in the tally. I had an A on it. I said, see? And they all looked at each other like, just wait. My second paper was an F and had nothing to do with my writing skills. I just did not interpret the book the same way that the professor did. I don't know if any of you had this guy, but I would describe him as a professor that sat on the desk and would spin around on the desk while he was teaching us. And sometimes I would just be sitting there watching him spin. He was a little weird. I guess he was a good professor, but I never knew if I was going to hit or miss. I passed the class, so I didn't flunk out of it, did all right, but I'll just say he was a little weird. Special programs. I always looked up to Linda because I felt like she was like right on sister, making sure she was dedicated, making sure that she looked out for her people. And I love Mr. Cody and Mr. Foster and Dave when he came after, and Al and all the rest of them. But I just kind of felt like they were on point. And even though it was back then, as we look at what is happening in our society today, we still need people to be on point. And I've taken a real interest in working with the NAACP at home. But because I love young people so much, my focus the last 4 or 5 years is I'm the AXO chairperson. And also, when you guys gave me that Black Alumni Award, you made me work harder. You made me work harder because I felt like I need to live up to whatever you guys saw in me. And I'll move on. But anyway, I just say I loved you for that. And I love young people, so I work hard still with young people. I'm also top teen advisor with Top Ladies of Distinction. So I'm still dealing with a lot of young people, even though I retired. Yes, I did visit the special programs house, and sometimes not to study, sometimes just to rub shoulders with people that I loved and respected. What is the most significant issue confronting black students? Finances, of course, but other than that, I think is prioritizing, balancing, having fun, growing up, finding yourself, and making sure you graduate and stay on task. So I think balancing act as well as finances. The two biggest challenges facing Ball State. I think that all the college, I know it's a matter of supply and demand, but when you raise your standards so high, you're knocking out some people because sometimes young people don't mature to the level of getting their grade point the way they need to, and it doesn't mean that they can't graduate from college. They can be very, very smart but need that extra maturity, need that extra help, and especially if they come out of home where they don't have college graduates and they don't have those experiences that other young people have. So it's always been a concern about the grade, because you can't get it all on test scores and grade point average. I had very high test scores, but my GPA, I wouldn't have been able to get in Ball State today, because I had a girlfriend, her grade point average was higher than mine, but she took the no frills classes. I was taking stuff like analytical geometry, and I don't know why, but those kind of things, those things will make your grade point average a little lower. And so then when I came to Ball State and they put me in these really tough math classes, I said, why are you doing this? I'm not a math. They said, because you took it in high school. I said, it's come back to haunt me because being online and trying to get up for 8 o'clock analytical trigonometry or something class, and that was the only time they gave it, I was not a morning person, and I was online. That class almost kept me here. But I did come out in 4 years and 1 summer. I'll put it like that. In my immediate family, my mom went to college, Lincoln University. I think she was there less than a semester. She faked heart condition because she didn't want to go to college in the first place. So I don't know if that counts. She went, she didn't stay. My dad, I don't know if he ever got a high school diploma, and he's real smart. And so when I see him, he wants me to see this certificate because he ended up being over the sanitation workers in Ohio. And he had to do it by going to some type of school or something. I said, Daddy, I know you're smart. You know, because certificates and degrees don't always, to me, mean how smart you are. It means how consistent you are and how hard you fight for what you want. Because there's a lot of smart people out there that just don't have the tenacity, the desire, or the stick-to-itiveness. Yes, if I had to do it again, I would do it again. I would come here because of the relationships. I do keep contact with Betty Wilkes. I was just with her, like I said. Linda Brooks Miles, Sherry Crawford Curry. In fact, she was supposed to be here today, but she's attending a lot of, I think it was Dr. Brown up here talking about people dying and stuff. When you get our age, you end up going to hospital visits, wakes, nursing homes, and that's why we got to get some young people in here, you know, because that's what our conversation is about. When we were on campus, it was about maybe studying grades and where the party was. When you're young married, you talk about your children and your job and your stuff like that. Now it's your aches, your pains, and who died. So we got to get some more young people in here. Now, I move on. I am on script, though. Do I maintain contact? There are some other people I talk to regularly on the telephone. A lot of people think my husband is a Ball State grad because he always comes with me and I always buy him a shirt. Well, I feel like the way to keep connected with the man that you love is to keep him with you. So, and by now, there's a lot of you he looks forward to seeing. He always talks about you, Yami, because Yami, I don't know, Al, because he loves music. He's a jazz enthusiast, and sometimes when we listen to someone, I said, I wonder if Yami has that. He said, oh, he probably does. Yami has everything. And so I think that's a major connection. He likes the music that you and him experience together. Let's see, like I said, my Aunt Lil, which I call Dee Dee, who's also an AKA, was one of my biggest influences about coming to college. Because I figured if she could go to college in the 20s, Butler University, where they only allowed 10 blacks on campus at a time, that surely I could. Some of you may not know that history about Butler, and it wasn't at its present location. I think she said it was in Irvington or something like that. But she was my biggest motivator. And my mother always said, don't waste Aunt Dee Dee's money like I did. And that also made me want to strive to get my own money because I didn't want to waste anybody's money. And by then, she was close to retirement and needed her money. So with the help of a counselor at Northwest High School, which was predominantly Caucasian at the time, there was 10 blacks in my graduating class. He saw something in me, told me to take an IQ test again. He said, they say it doesn't change, but I see some growth and maturity in you. And then he just said, yeah, it was very good. Then he said, take the SAT, the ACT. He helped me apply for scholarships. I got grants and all those type of things. And my aunt went there personally and said, thank you so much for helping her. And he said she deserved it. And she said, yeah, but we don't always get what we deserve. So I'm thanking you. The most important thing that happened to me at Ball State was growing up, getting some sense when I finally graduated, maintaining close friendships, and coming back to this reunion and being with you guys. Most critical event that occurred to me is one time when I got really, really sick. I was out of class for about a week or two. I swear I was going to flunk out of school, but I refused to go home. Guy I was dating at the time, my husband knows, so I can say, Maurice, his mom sent food to my dorm because I was so weak that I wasn't even supposed to go down. They wanted to do some type of surgery, but I wouldn't let it happen because I was afraid of that particular surgery. So I just stayed on medication, stayed in my room, and ate. Again, a lot of you didn't know that, but I was able to keep my grades up. And one, I think it was my psychology teacher, he said, you've missed my class so many times. He said, I don't know if you're going to graduate. I said, what do I have in this class, though? He said, a B. I said, I've been very sick. Can you just give me what I have? He said, okay. I said, and I'll be back next week. I promise you I won't miss any more, but I've been very sick. And so it turned out all right. Now, my French teacher said, you're flunking my class. I said, if you give me a D, I promise not to take it again. And he did, because he knew I was a good student before I got sick. So I did have some professors, I can't call them by name, but I did have, and I don't remember having any black, I can't remember if I ever had a black professor here at Ball State. My present perception of Ball State and the student experience, and I have been here several times. I was here with a group of students from the school where I worked, Ben Davis High School. I would come on the bus with them when they would have Minority Day and things like that. And I also came up here with the graduate advisor to see young women that were online. I have to watch how I say that these days. We don't call it what we used to call it, online. And I talked to them about being an Alpha Kappa Alpha and giving them history. So I still connect. And there's a Mr. Payne, and I'm about to finish up. Charles Payne, he works here on campus. And he had me speak in Indianapolis. And I was about 15 minutes. He had me speak in Indianapolis to prospective students. So I do what I can. And for about 5 years, I was on the Black Alumni Council. Right. So these are some of the things where I try to give back, and I give a little bit out of my pocket as well. It's not a whole lot because I don't have a whole lot, but I try to be consistent. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Sandy. One of the things that I will say as the hands go up is that this is really not a script. It's just really a guideline for some things that you might want to. No, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just want people to know that they don't have to feel like they have to go through every question or every item that's on here. It's just a topical guideline that you can just refer to in case that you don't have something that you want to talk about specifically. Okay. And I will emphasize with Sandra, she did serve on the Black Alumni Constituent Society board for a number of years and has always been very, very supportive of all of the activities that we promoted as our group, and we're very appreciative of that. And as she said, she was selected as one of our outstanding Black alumni a few years ago and received that award. So one of the things I'd also like to throw out to the group is that the theme of the reunion this year is Bridging the Gap. So as we speak, I'd like for you all to think a little bit on how we can bridge that gap. Because it was noted to me several times last night that a large portion of the attendees are from a specific era or a specific time frame, and the need and the importance of extending that forward to some of the more recent students. One of the things I mentioned is that we specifically have an award that we give to young people in hopes that that will generate an interest in coming back and serving with the board, serving the university in various ways. And there are a lot of different ways that not only young people but other alums can serve the university. And it doesn't require a lot of time and a lot of attention. But anyway, that's one of the things that we really want to focus on. How can we bridge that gap in addition to talking about our experiences, but looking forward to the future and bringing young alumni back into the university fold. Because as we step away, and we will step away, it's important that we have someone to follow in those footsteps, to continue on the work that has been started by Linda Wilson and Dave Davis and all of those people that were out front and pursuing these black alumni interests, years and years ago. So just keep that in mind. I've got Greg Williams and Phil Snorton next, okay? Doctor. Yeah, we've got an hour, so we want to get around because I see a lot of folks with their hands up now. So,
good morning, everyone. Good morning. First, I want to really thank Alan. Alan has done so much for Ball State and this program, and he's put all these things together. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's great to be here with you and to see folks that I've had a chance to not only go to school with, but to see over the years as I've come back to the alumni reunion. So it's a real pleasure to be here. Actually, I wasn't at the last one because I had my third bout of cancer, but this month I'm 2 years cancer-free. And it's
all right.
So it's Dr. Greg Williams, the class of 1966, but when I was growing up here in Muncie, it was Greg Williams of the Madison Street Housing Projects Playgrounds.
All right.
And actually, that's where I first met Bill G. Now, Bill, when he came in 1960, they had some of the best athletes ever to come to Ball State. It was Bill, Ray Satterfield, Ed Butler, Jim Middleton, and others. And the guys from Indianapolis came over, and so they decided they were going to come over to the playground and play basketball against us. It was including me and Brian Settles and a couple of others who played, and Melvin Jolly played on the Muncie Central basketball team. Well, they were going to show us how to play basketball. They came over, but they went home with their tail between their legs because we beat them. I don't think they ever quite got over that. Of course, I met my comeuppance a few years later when Wiley Wells showed up, and I tried to guard Wiley. The only way I could stop him was to step on his foot, hold on to him, and do the best that I could, and still that wasn't good enough. So my roots with Ball State go back a long time, actually even go back much further than that, because my dad spent a year at Howard University and then came back. He went to Ball State, but he flunked out of Ball State. But there was a friend of his that he grew up with who I became very close to, was Harry Watkins, and many of you may have heard of Harry. Actually, Harry would have been the first black graduate of Ball State back in around 1936 or something like that. The reason he wasn't the first black graduate of Ball State, because in those days it was all teaching, and you had to do student teaching before you graduated, and they were unable to find a teaching placement for Harry. So Harry had to sit out a year and actually became a bellhop at a hotel in Kingston, New York. Now, I live in New York City, and actually Kingston's about an hour. And I've gone up to see that hotel, and that's the place that Harry spent the year until the dean of the School of Education called him a year later and said, Harry, we've got a place for you, and you can come back and do the student teaching and graduate. Otherwise, he would have been the first black graduate. He was the first black male to graduate from Ball State. So it really had a very special meaning when I go up and see that place. Now, some people at Ball State knew my dad before they knew me, Buster Williams, and, you know, as I say that, he was an expert in street corner philosophy. He was a very smart guy, and, you know, it was incredible growing up with him. I came to Ball State. Actually, I played football and basketball at Muncie Central, and I was going to play football. I decided I didn't want to do that, but it didn't work out, and I wanted to play basketball, and that didn't quite work out either. So I remember actually my first year having virtually no money, and actually later on as the college president, when I tell students this story, they just can't believe it. I remember I was so poor that I went into the financial aid office here at Ball State, and they said you're supposed to fill out your, you know, information about your financial need. And so I looked in that and said, well, what's your father's income? Well, my dad was an alcoholic, hadn't worked for 10 years, and I put 0 down for that. And they said, well, what's your mother's income? I hadn't seen her for over a decade, so I put 0 down for that. And I said, you know, no one is going to believe that I'm this poor. And so what has broken the heart of financial aid officers is I've told them this over the years, so I said, no one's going to believe that. So I tore that up and walked out of there. Didn't even ask for financial aid. Now, of course, later on I became a university president, and it just boggles my mind to think, you know, that and for so many students, that's the end right there. That is the end. You're done. Nothing else happens. You don't have the money. But I was still so dedicated to getting an education and wanting to pursue that actually I ended up mopping floors over in the Practical Arts Building for 75 cents an hour for 20 hours a week. I was in the Ball Memorial Hospital washing dishes for 75 cents an hour on Saturday and Sunday because I was so dedicated and wanting to pursue my education. The next year, actually, I got a job. I became a deputy sheriff, and some of you may remember seeing me in my deputy sheriff uniform, which sometimes I had to wear to class if I had an 8 o'clock class because I worked the 11 o'clock at night to 7 a.m. shift. And in fact, I saw some of the Ball State students during my time as deputy sheriff. I remember once I even saw one of the professors. That I was called out, and I knew this area was out in Haldeman Village, and there had been a kid who had playing baseball, and they broke a window out of this guy's house, and so I roll up. It's one of my professors. Actually, it's Mort Rosenberg. Some of you may have had him. And, of course, as you know him, he was a guy who was all over everything. He's all wild and crazy. He was out there, and I said, look, get back on your yard and get in your house, otherwise I'm going to arrest you. So I never thought I would be telling a professor that, but I did, in fact, tell the professor that. But that was a way that I was able to work my way through Ball State as a full-time deputy sheriff and working here as a deputy and then going to school as well. The big issue, you know, at Ball State, and I grew up here, and I'm familiar with the racism, and you may know as a black boy who looks white, I saw a lot of this, and a lot of it was directed at me. I remember I dated this white girl here at Ball State once. We went out, and I told her what my name was. She said, you know, your name sounds familiar, so you must be socially acceptable. Well, actually, she talked to some other folks and found I was not socially acceptable later on. So that was our first and last date. But the interesting thing, one of the big issues was off-campus housing, because many of you stayed over in the area where I lived because you know that the folks near campus were not renting to black students. There was a group formed called the Muncie Interrelations Council. Actually, Jay Smith, who later on became president of the Indianapolis NAACP, was the president, and my girlfriend, Sarah Whitney, was the vice president of that. And so they fought the administration. Actually, the administration was at best indifferent to the issues with regard to black students. But they got the rule passed that if you were going to rent to a Ball State student, you had to agree to rent to every Ball State student. You could not discriminate against that. And so that was really great and something my wife really was very, very pleased of. And we were dating a while, and people said, well, what's this, biracial, mixed-race boy dating this white girl? Well, actually, now we've been married 47 years this month. Unfortunately, she's now facing Alzheimer's, and so we're trying to deal with that. But she, loves the opportunity she had to really try to make a difference. I would like to say a couple words about some of the professors here. Again, some of them were indifferent, but there were some who were really, truly outstanding professors who made a real difference in my life and gave me confidence that I had the ability to do the things that I wanted to do. One was Carson Bennett, who taught psychology, and I remember when I got an A in his class, and obviously one of the issues I was in was mixed race identity, and I was doing research back in the 60s on that. I got an A in that class in psychology, and so I was so excited about that. And then I remember that I took Dr. Farrell, and many of you may have had Dr. Farrell. World Civilization class, that was the class, that was really one of the toughest classes there. And I remember he used to like to hand out the exams, and he would hand out the exams after you'd taken them by the order you did in the class. The best student got the exam first. And so the students knew that I was a pretty good student, and everybody, we had about maybe 7 or 8 black students, and they're with me, about 70 students in the class. And so he started handing out the exams once. And he handed out exams, and I didn't get my exam. He goes on, and I got the last exam handed out, and he said, Greg Williams has received the highest grade in this class. It was then that I realized that I could do everything I wanted to do. And for that, that's what I call Ball State, that I realized at that time, after getting A's in those classes, that I did have the ability to achieve my dreams, and realized that actually what was going to happen, it was just going to take time. And time worked. Ultimately, I ended up with 6 earned degrees and 6 honorary doctorates, including one from Ball State, and served as university president for 11 years. But the foundation for all of that, the foundation that helped me believe in myself, that being that little boy playing on the Madison Street playground, that I could in fact do all I wanted to do, started here at Ball State. And that put me in a position during those years, close to 40 years in academic life, to go around and make a difference. And I've talked to literally thousands of people, and many of you may have read my book, which became a national bestseller, Life on the Color Line, the true story of a white boy who discovered he was black. I've talked all over the country, and the impact I have been able to have on people's lives has just been amazing to me. So it's not all about me. It's about putting me in a position where I can go out and help try to interact with people and make a difference and show them that you can in fact achieve. And by virtue of being in those positions, I was able to look back when I was the administrator making the decision to say, okay, I've seen this before, and it's not going to happen here as long as I'm president of this university. And that's what Ball State means to me. It opened doors, it gave me confidence in myself, and it allowed me to go out to the larger world to, in fact, make a difference. Thank you very much.
All right, all right. Okay, okay. Whenever I'm around Dr. Williams there, I often ask the question, what if? What if he would have become the president of Ball State University? What if he would have become the president of Ball State? Because for those of you who don't know, he was the leading candidate based upon university staff and based upon the students. He was the one that was perceived as the person that should be the president. But for some reason it didn't occur. But things happen for a reason, and he still was able to maintain that vision and that outreach in his future capacities there. So, all right, Mr. Phil Snorton is up next.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I didn't anticipate being here. I was here last night thinking I was only going to be here just for the reception to see a few old friends, but you guys made me so nostalgic that I felt like I had to come back and say a few things that were on my mind, and a couple of things that came to mind as a result of things that were said earlier. Backing up a moment, I graduated from Ball State in 1971. I received an undergraduate degree in urban and regional planning. I then went on and got a master's degree in public administration and finished that in 1973. I am from Indianapolis, Indiana, live now in Chicago. I think the most important questions for me were the most significant events for me that happened here at Ball State. There were two things. One was pledging Kappa Alpha Psi, and the other was having the great opportunity to work as a graduate assistant in the special programs house. When I say pledging Kappa Alpha Psi, it's because when I first came here, I was not a great student coming out of high school. I came here in winter quarter because I was looking to play football, but my grades weren't great enough to get a scholarship. So I was told, well, if you come here in the winter quarter, come out for spring ball, you have a chance maybe to get some money, etc. Well, I got here, went out for football, and this kind of reflects on where the university was at that time. I graduated from high school, Shortridge High School, where I was captain of the football team, most valuable player. I had a mustache, I had a little beard under here and what have you. And when I came here and they said to me, well, you got to cut off your mustache. You got to cut off your beard. And I'm like, well, you ain't gave me no money yet. I'm not majoring in badminton. I'm majoring my mother made it very clear, you got to get out here in 4 years. And I knew I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, so I decided this is not for me, But the guys in Kappa Alpha Psi took me aside. I had Kappas in my family, and they knew that I was going to pledge, and said, let me tell you how to get through here. And that was very important. Two guys, John Bailey, the late John Bailey, and the late Stephen Heathcock. We called him Big Whiskey at the time. They took me aside, and they said, look, you see that student union? You see those kids over in the corner, playing bid whist all the time? He said, don't know how to play bid whist. Don't learn how to play bid whist. He said, come into the tally, kiss your girlfriend, say hello to everybody, and split to the library. Schedule your classes so that you have a little time in between to go to the library. And this is how you do that. And if you do this, you can get through here. You can party, have a good time, and at the same time, get out of here. And that was an important lesson to me, that they took the time to take me aside and not only encouraged me to pledge the fraternity, but told me how to get an education out of this place, Like I said, special programs was important because it's what allowed me to get a master's degree. Working with Bob Foster and Bill and Joe Lee Bob Cody. That's what we called him in the frat, Joe Lee Bob Cody. But at that time, I graduated in 71, and I started that in 72, and that was kind of like the beginning of the special programs. It was in that period, and my frat brother and I, Larry Willis, who's here with me, we were both graduate assistants, and we were just talking. We felt like we were kind of like guinea pigs. We were trying to help. I know Bob and Foster and Mr. Cody kind of knew where they wanted to go, but Larry and I didn't know where we wanted to go. But because of that, it allowed me. I got a graduate assistantship, and it allowed me to get significant hours towards my master's and to ultimately get it. And so those are the two most important things. I also look back on that experience as what one said earlier about the fact that even though we were Greek, there was not a lot of animosity. I lived in Wagner Hall, and when I was pledging, I was in Wagner with this guy, and he was not pledging at the time. But anytime we needed help, when we were online, we needed a car to get somewhere or something like that, it was Guyami over here who was, helping us out. And so it was a different time. Al talked about bridging the gap. I think one of the reasons that those of us that are here are in the age bracket that we are is that we saw a lot of, lack of a better term, shit, and came about at a time when we were taught to respect the efforts of those who came before us because of the civil rights movement and what have you. Perhaps, and I don't know, this is just my opinion, perhaps the younger generation of people have benefited and to an extent that they're not aware of all the things that have come before them and all the things that we've experienced. I don't know how to get that message to them, but I have learned over the years that when you want to solve a problem, you got to start with asking the right questions, and that's the question I pose to us. How do we get the message to them? How do we make them understand that? Perhaps the fact that we live in a time now where we're dealing with a lot of violence in our community, police injustice and what have you. Maybe that's a way of maybe rallying the troops and what have you to deal with that. But I also believe as an old-timer, you got to know how to carry yourself and deal with certain situations in order to get past them. I say that, and I have to qualify that statement by saying my father was a policeman, and he was killed in the line of duty when I was a baby in Indianapolis. So even though I've experienced pretty much all the injustices through the years of other black men have experienced, I still have a soft spot for cops, But nonetheless, I think that, we have to begin to explain to people, you have to look out for yourself. And you have to know how to carry yourself in a certain way to avoid issues. You can only be responsible for yourself. You cannot be responsible for the racism of another person. But you have to know how to avoid letting that make you a statistic. I've told my son, who's 29, that so many times, that the important thing is for you to live another day. It's not to say yes, officer, and no, officer. It's not being submissive. I didn't tell him to say, yeah, I was a boss. I said, keep your hands where they can see you and say, yes, officer, no, officer. Simple as that. And get home. So I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm just glad to have had an opportunity to be here. So glad to have heard Bob Cody.
Oh, yeah.
Glad to have heard him. He and Mr. Foster, Bob Foster, like I said, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have got through grad school. And I'm so glad that you and Linda and others are continuing to do the things that you do. And thank you so much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Phil. Lynn, is your hand up? Is your hand up? Oh, okay. I thought you were fanning. I didn't know. Okay, let me get her, and then I'll come back. Come on there. All right.
I'm Linda Wilson. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. And when I came to Ball State, it was in 1968. I graduated with a elementary education degree in 72, went on to go into the School of Education Psychology with trying to get a degree in psychometrics. And when I finished my freshman year, I had financial aid, and then they said, you need to do student work, college work study. I'm like, okay, why? So that's when I decided and got a job in the special programs office. At that time, special programs was in the basement of the student center. There were several other individuals and who were down there. We didn't have any money. We were basically a person, a director, who was supposed to meet all the needs, make everything work for all of the students that were on campus. My freshman class was 64 black students. There were 2 other individuals who were from out of state. Jackie Owens from Illinois and Tommy Humphreys, who was from Ohio. That was it. And when I made the decision to go to Ball State, I did it because I wanted to be a special education teacher. And my mom had a friend who she grew up with who was in Indianapolis. She was also a teacher. And so she said, well, I've got a good idea. I have a friend whose daughter is at Ball State, and my daughter is married to a young man who's also at Ball State. That was John and Janet Thomas.
Buckner.
Buckner.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say Butler. I knew that wasn't right. And so Janice wrote to me over the summer what it was going to be like, what to expect, and what I needed to be able to do. My parents went to Kentucky State, as people have mentioned before. And I went to Kentucky State on a regular basis. For every graduation, homecoming, my mom and dad took us up there. And so it was like, okay, this is what I expected Ball State to be like. Wrong. When I got to Ball State, I had never seen the campus, hadn't a clue what it was going to be like. Both my mom and my dad came up, and I was in the residence hall, and there was only one other black student in that whole graduation situation where we were new students. And her name was Sandra McCants. And Sandra was from Gary. Sandra didn't say anything to me the whole time. I brought a book because I thought this is going to be a pain. And when I got there, it was like they had entertainment for us. Country western music. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So they were like, why did you pick Ball State? Well, I had this book of all the different schools that had good, strong special education programs. So I applied. And I got this financial aid to come. And my dad was saying to me, my sister was graduating the year behind me. So where I really wanted to go, which was Radcliffe, he was saying, that's not happening. We don't have that kind of money. You don't necessarily have the contacts. And I had decided that even though I liked Kentucky State, I could not see myself doing all of the things that historically black schools did. The dressing, the money, the fraternities and sororities, that just was not something that I thought I could do. And both my parents, as I said, were at Kentucky State, but so was my aunt. She was a 1917 graduate. And I was like, nah. And I didn't want to go to schools in Kentucky because I wanted to be around new people, because that was one of the things that I thought was wonderful about going to Kentucky State, because you're going to meet all these new people from all over the country. And so that's basically one of the big reasons that I liked Ball State. So when I got here, got into the residence hall, they didn't have enough rooms for all the freshmen. So we had 2 sets of bunk beds. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, how are we going to do this? And we were in quarters then. So I had a roommate who was from Columbus, and we had another roommate, but she never really stayed in the room very often. She had decided she really wanted to travel, and so she was gone by the end of the quarter. My other roommate, her biggest thing was she wanted to get married. And anytime she would come into the room, she would bring the other white girls in. But the thing that made the Mott Hall so crazy was they had made a decision to put one black person on each floor. There were 4 floors. And it was like, wow. And our dorm director had a dog. She let it run. I'm scared to death of dogs. So I didn't like the idea this dog was running around. So I was like, okay, I got through that first year, and I came back, and I started working in the special programs. And then I started to learn about all the other types of activities you could get involved in. I never was in a fraternity or a sorority. I knew lots of folks who did that. And I was one of those individuals that when my friends decided to pledge a sorority, we used to do things like someone would call and I would say, no, she's not here. She'd be right over there. That was my roommate, Pat Kidd. And other people who were on her line were also in the room. So I had the responsibility of going to the door, and I'd open it like this. Yes? Is Pat here? No. So I did a lot of that. And getting involved with special programs, I did a couple of different things. I got involved in student government, and I was on the university's admissions and credits committee. And that responsibility was such that we would come back to the university early, and we would make the decisions on whether or not someone who had flunked out would get back in. And that was always very interesting to me because we had to make policy decisions. And so I worked with the faculty, and they made those decisions. And then when I would leave, I would run into individuals who were in the tally who I had just gone over their paperwork. And they might say that, yes, I'm going to be here. And I would know that, no, they weren't going to be here. And there were a couple of individuals that every semester, I get semesters and quarters turned around because after I left here, I was in the university for a number of years. But in the quarter system, you had to have a certain number of hours and a certain level of grades, and they didn't have it. And so it would be 1 quarter, 1 quarter, 1 quarter. And if you did that 3 times in a row, then you had to be gone for a year. And they would then say, well, I think I have decided to take a year off and work. And I'd go, oh, okay. So I did that, and I was on some other committees, and one of those was the International Student Committee. And through that interaction, I got to meet Thelma Hyatt. Thelma Hyatt had been a residence hall director, but at that point, she was returning after a major accident, and she was the new director for the International Center. And I spent a lot of time working with her and working with international students. And it was fascinating to me because I got to meet students from Africa, India, and they had these afternoon programs, and I would go over there and learn and talk and get to be friends with many of those individuals, which prepared me for some of the work that I did later. And I'll mention that as well. So I did that. We did lots of programs. got to work with people like Teresa and Al and Phil and all of the other individuals who became graduate assistants. And it was like family, you know, it was like, okay, I've got some people I can talk to. And being from a small family, and there were 3 of us, 3 girls, having guys that I could feel comfortable asking questions about social things and things like that, that was wonderful for me because I didn't know who else I could talk to, and I knew the girls weren't going to tell me the truth. And so that made a big difference. But most of my time was spent either doing work at special programs in any number of different capacities. It's mentioned that we had the Malcolm X library. I helped create that, working with the only African-American librarian, and we had those books not only at Special Programs House, but also in the university library. Now, I must admit, there are a couple of individuals who came back to the university that checked out books that we never got back. And when we tried to reorder them, they were no longer in print. And so several years later, 2 of those books did show back up. They brought them back, and I was like, yes, yes. We also did a lot of things with different programs. And we did a T. We did the career programs. We did a lot of different things, and those things helped prepare me for what I ended up doing, which is working at the university. And I worked with graduate students, and I also had a scholarship group, which was a lot like the DaySEP program that we had here, that we brought in students during the second quarter because we thought that they would need additional attention and help. And so that was great for me because then it helped me when I decided to actually do some college teaching. The biggest things that made an impact on me when I went and got my master's in psychometrics, Dr. J, that's what we called him, informed me that as an African-American female, I would never get a job in psychometrics because school systems would not hire me because they did not want a black person making major decisions about their children. And that was like, oh, wow, now what am I going to do? Because I really enjoyed it. It made sense to me. You were actually testing kids, and you could determine what types of academic potential they had. But that was not going to be a possibility. So I ended up in student affairs in a number of different capacities, including housing. And doing housing, I learned a lot about the needs of students making those transitions in terms of parents who came in, and I was at Ohio University, and they had dads coming in because the building I was in had been a men's building. So a lot of the men were very upset that these urinals were in the bathrooms. And they wanted to know whether we were going to take the urinals out because they had never wanted their kids, their girls, to see these urinals. The girls found a wonderful way to deal with the urinals. They used them to wash their hair.
All right.
Second thing was at that time, we did not have visitation. Well, they had been cleaned and all of that. They just thought they were neat ways to get their hair, you know. And, I'm I've never seen a Ural either, so, I really didn't have any problems with what they were doing. But the reactions that you're having are the reactions that over the years, I've had people have with that. The other area that made a difference in terms of those transitions was when I was in school, in the residence hall, men could not be on the floors. You didn't have visitations. Well, at that point, students were able to have men visitations. My job was to make sure that certain things did not take place and that they left in an appropriate time. And I can remember being at Ball State the first time they decided to let us have visitation, which was like 1 to 3 on Sundays. And I can remember Pat coming back from Richmond, and her then boyfriend, now her husband, came up on the floor, and she was like, "Linda, you're not dressed." I had little shorts and a T-shirt, but she thought I should have had something else on. And so you begin to have to look at how your generation looks at things and someone else, how the cultures may be different based on being from a small town or a large town, if number of males and females in the families and all of those kinds of things. Now, with the type of diversity we have in the departments here, now you've got a whole different set of issues that you have to look at. Right now, having been retired from the University of Louisville for the last 2 years, one of the big things in terms of housing is who's going to be the roommate. If it's not someone of their particular culture, there's an issue, and how you deal with that. And because the policies say that you can ask for a different roommate, we have students who go, I can have this person as a roommate. If they're gay or straight, those kinds of issues come up. Language becomes an issue. So for me, being able to interact with Thelma and the people there, that made a big difference in terms of being more open. And I continued to interact with her up until the time she died about 4 years ago. And what made it important for me was this was a woman who could tell me how to be a professional. Not so much in terms of the techniques and so forth, but how to function as a woman. How do I make a decision about whether or not I want to be married or not, and what kind of issues I need to think about? How do I make sure to keep in contact, and those types of things? And for my experience at Ball State, she made a tremendous impact for me and thinking about what I needed to do. So she was the first person who said to me, get a PhD. And she had a friend who had been trying to get hers for the last 6 years. And she was much older, and so she really never was able to do that. But keeping in touch with Mr. Foster, who, when he went for his PhD, one of the faculty got on his committee, and he did not get his degree until after that man took a leave of absence to get that degree. And people like Dave Davis and Myron Richardson also talked about, when we had these opportunities to interact, how difficult it was to get a PhD as a person of color in particular departments that had not had that happen before. You needed somebody who guaranteed you they would do everything they could to make sure you got that degree.
Okay.
And so when I've worked with students, I've tried to do that because of the experiences I had here and working with faculty who said, these are the things that we need to make sure that are going to take place. And a lot of times those decisions were made in small rooms with one or two people. And that's what we were doing here. And we made a big difference. Because when I look at the audience, one of the things that was important to me was that I wanted to see an alumni group like what I saw at Kentucky State with my parents. And they came back. In fact, my mom would come back up into her 80s with some of her classmates. And they were wonderful. And one of the things that has been important to me is coming back here and talking to, interacting with individuals like these three young ladies here who've been involved with us on the board, because I learned something about what it was like then. And then that was something I could then share with someone else. And the younger ones who were here would let me know what it was like when they're going. Because I remember the first time I saw Bill Cheek. He really had that first reunion. And he was walking down to the admissions office. Did you just do? And I was like, I didn't know him, but to hear him talk, what it was like, it was wonderful. And there were other incidents, at Ball State, which let me know very quickly about issues of race and color. And that was one of the things that also was very hurtful to me, because as some of you may have seen, there's a picture of me as one of the candidates for Miss Black Ball State. And I came in first. But I was also told by one of the judges that one of the reasons I didn't get the position as the winner was I was the wrong color. I wasn't black enough. And that was hard. Yeah. The other one was, and Tommy and I talked about this the other night, was I was president for the Black Student Union. But there were a lot of men on campus who didn't think it was appropriate for a woman to be in that position. So I changed it from president, and Tommy and I were co-chairs. Okay. And that was to keep some of the nonsense out.
Linda, if I could interrupt for a second. We're entering the last quarter of our program, so if I could ask you to sort of wrap it up, because I do want to extend out to some other people here for the last few minutes.
Okay. And so I've been helping with Ball State, special programs, helping set this up. And so I keep doing it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Linda doesn't really do service to her participation, her involvement, both as an undergrad and as a graduate assistant at the university. Having been on campus when she arrived and while she was here, I can attest to you that whatever challenges she may have met of not being dark enough or not being a male, they were duly challenged. They were duly challenged. So, okay, can I see the hands of those others who might want to speak here, because we want to try to make sure that anyone who wants to speak, and I'm going to draft some people. This young lady here was next. Okay, who else back there? Yeah, this is wide open. This is a wide open forum. Okay, Ronald Taylor is next after her. Is that John Hall back there? John Hall, and then... Oh, that's Donnie Moore. Okay, all right, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning.
All right.
Lola Jones was my maiden name here, class of 1979. I'm kind of a youngster then as I look about. A bachelor's of science in special education, my lifelong work, as Linda said. And a first-generation college student out of Gary, Indiana. Of course, my experience was not that of many. I had been in an all African-American culture all of my life, born and raised there in Gary, a graduate of Roosevelt High School. So coming to Ball State was a cultural shock for me, completely. I lived in Noria Complex, Baker Hall. My first roommate was from Crawfordsville, Indiana. She didn't know that, as she would say, what is that smell if we were pressing our hair or straightening our hair? Just a whole myriad of things. But I tell you the best thing of ever, it has been my lifelong occupation as a special educator, 32 years in Gary Community Schools, the last 17 as an administrator and principal. My passion for special ed has been always there. I've taken that passion from Ball State, where I had excellent instructors, Dr. Spencer back in the old Teachers College. I heard somebody speak about Dr. Charles Payne, who was over the multicultural piece once the 70s kind of rolled in. I came here in 75 and left in 79. Like many, I stayed on campus. My aunt, who was taking care of my education, she didn't play. I wasn't moving off campus. I wasn't going to the tally. I wasn't hanging out. I wasn't flipping cards on the table. I was very, very clear that I had to execute. They're my aunt's money and my mother's brother's money. It was for me to be educated. And I took that to heart because that was a great sacrifice for them. And my mom died at a young age for me. I was 6, raised by my father. So it was important that I be able to be independent, be educated, and be well informed. All of that took place here at Ball State. This is my first time coming back for something. Mm-hmm. My brother-in-law, Ronald Taylor, and my husband are here with us. We now live in Alabama. Ronald, of course, lives in Georgia. And to see people, of course, many of you that I don't know, is to let me see for sure that I made the greatest choice to come here. I remember people saying, I'm going to go to black schools. People went to Spelman. I didn't have no Spelman money. I kind of thought about going to Hampton Institute. That was a no-no. Didn't have any money for that. But this teacher's college here at Ball State equipped me for a lifelong occupation. Even in Alabama, my skills, I do adjunct work down at Alabama A&M, which is a black institution. I'm teaching teachers now how to be great collaborative instructors. That's the new word for special education now, collaboration. So I have no great demise. I'm just grateful that I had the opportunity to attend here. My first little job was at Bracken's Library. I remember being the only African-American there. But it was all great. And I pledged Beta Phi, so I'm an Alpha Kappa Alpha woman. And that was a great experience. So everything that college was to afford me in that 4-year period, because I did 4 years, I did not play around. I did no extended time, 1 summer and 4 years. I was grateful to be here, very appreciative for the education, went on to get several other degrees, of course, at other institutions in Indiana, but the foundation was laid here, and it was a great foundation. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Moore. I'm sorry.
I admire being called John Hall.
All right.
Good morning. My name is Donnie Moore. I'm from Gary, Indiana. I came to Ball State in 1969, graduated in 1973 with a degree in special education. I went to Columbus, Ohio, taught in the school system there, worked in the school system there for 39 years. Ball State provided me with a great foundation, a great foundation. We had the opportunity as a special education students that Ball State had great recognition throughout the country. So I was able to interview with districts all over the country, never had to leave. They came here, had many job offers, felt real good, felt very important, but it was because of the quality of education. How I got to Ball State was a different story. I did not come here I did not plan to come here. I was going to Indiana State. Balbo and I brought Foster back one weekend, while Foster was, Balbo was Ronald Taylor, in case I had to get that. Right. But we bought Foster. Ronald Taylor and I brought Foster back, who was home for a week, but home for a weekend, but he stayed a week because at that time he was pledging, and he was trying to get away from Al and his other big brothers. And upon bringing Foster back, he introduced me to a young lady, and she had a great smile, and she was just beautiful. And Foster said, well, he's going to Indiana State. And she said, you should come to school down here. We got in the car, and I told Balbo, I'm coming to Ball State. And that's how I got here. But it's been a great experience, and the greatest thing that happened to me here were the friendships that I've made that have spanned over 40 years, and I'm ever so grateful for that. Thank you.
All right. All right. I can't see. Who? Yeah, you're next, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. Who's that back there? I can't see that far. You have to. David Blake. Okay. All right. All right. All right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator.
All righty.
Hi, my name is Ronald J. Taylor. I'm also from Gary, Indiana, but I went to Frayville High School. So I came here, yes, but I had to get an understanding as it relates to being a 74 graduate here. I also in 77 received my master's here. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I taught school there. I'm an industrial arts teacher. That's what I started out doing. As some folks say, shop teacher. I was the one that you sent all the kids to, whether they were special ed or otherwise. Did that for about 15 years, and moved on to become an administrator, and I retired as an administrator of Bibb County Schools in Macon, Georgia. And I've been retired almost 10 years myself. I came to Ball State, and I'm one of those that hung out in the card room. Okay. And but I hung out in the library also, because I'll be in the library when they put you out. Some of y'all wouldn't be in there that late. So you can do those things if you monitor your time. I went to every party, like the young lady said in the beginning. I did not miss the party. And I used to make night trips to Indianapolis and back and do all those kind of things. But Ball State did one thing that you can always understand, that this institution, it gives you a good foundation for an education. And you just have to apply yourself. And you can get the help that you need, because all the students, also like that young lady said, will help you do those things that you may not have the skill base to conquer at that time. We just got to understand, as he said, generations and reaching down to get others and bring them in. We don't tell people to come to this institution. We don't market the institution. See, we have to tell young folks that, yeah, you have to. See, we're in a multicultural society. So if we don't tell our kids that they need to go and intermingle, that it ain't going to be easy like they think it is, because, we didn't make children non-accessible. You don't tell them to do anything. If they don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. If they don't want to eat it, you find something else to give them. If they don't want to wear it, you go pay whatever it costs to put it on them. So we have to make sure that children understand when you go off to school, it's to grow you, not to give you. And so once we get that understanding, we can help younger people come here. And some of the folks that have left here in these last, say, in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, we can get some of them back in here to bridge the gap that we go through. Thank you so very, very much. This is my first one here since I left, like I said, in 77. I don't know how the campus looked. I got lost, and I used to live in the city. I never stayed in the dorm. I always lived in the city. So on 7th, and I lived with I don't tell anybody, but I used to live with Foster. I was just so happy. I was just so happy Donnie lived there. But after that, I moved with myself and John Slayton. We moved off campus. But I did live with Foster, and Foster's one of my classmates. You understand this? We came out of high school together. And we've been running around together for many, many years, but I always spaced myself from him. So understand that we can do those things to try to help other people and young people, whether they're black or otherwise, to come to Ball State and do those things that are necessary to help our society as a whole. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'll try to make the next one.
All right. Thank you, Rama. David Blake. Somebody said David Blake was out there? Oh, Priscilla. Okay. All right. How you doing there?
My story is a little different because I go by Priscilla Dames Blake. Oh, yeah. When I went to Ball State, it was Priscilla Burris. I graduated in 74. I've done well. I've taught primary through university level. I'm an international trainer in conflict resolution, including training ex-militants for the country of Nigeria. But that really is not what my story about Ball State is. I was accustomed to being one, if not just a few, of the African Americans in a predominantly white situation in my middle school, where I grew up, and high school. So the racism that was felt here was not new to me. I never did learn how to play bid whiz. Still not very good at it. What was really important to me at Ball State was it was the place that I finished growing up. My father was a Baptist minister. My mother was extremely strict. She didn't play hopscotch. She still does not. So when I came to Ball State, I was the first one to attend a university in my family. So I knew I had to get in and get out on time, like I think it was Linda or somebody else said. What was really important to me was the relationships that were formed. When I came, I was 17, and I was green as green could be. Because when I said my mother didn't play hopscotch, she made me feel that, or my sisters and I feel that if you even looked at a boy, you was going to become pregnant. Now, the reason I said that is because when I say I finished growing up at Ball State, I truly did. I remember when I came here, I didn't know anything about fraternities and sororities. I didn't know anything. And I remember when I met, and it wasn't about sororities and fraternities at first, but when I met Sandy Hall, Sherry Crawford, I'm going to try not to cry, Sherry Crawford, Betty Wilkes, there was a few others, I remember Linda Wilson quite well. They wrapped their arms around me. They didn't talk about sororities at first. They just wrapped their arms around me. And I remember sophisticated Miss Sherry, she could not believe the experiences I had never had. And she really took me under her arms. I dated Ellis Dames. I was a freshman. He was a senior. It was the best experience ever because we danced. We had a great time. I loved the ladies that were teaching me everything. And he left. And then there was this year that I didn't do anything but work on my grades, and I pledged. And as the women taught me how to be an adult, how to be in a sorority, how to do this thing called a university, that's when I really grew. David Blake came on campus then in my junior year. And then he taught me how to skip school. And I don't know if you all remember, but when my mom thought that I was here studying like I had done when I was in high school and made great grades, he had to call her from the hospital because instead of being at school, he had me at a jazz concert in another state. And we got in a car accident, and that's when she learned that her little girl was no longer a little girl because she was sneaking off the campus with this guy called David Blake. It was wonderful, but the reason it was wonderful was because of the relationships that I had formed. Even though Ellis and I are not together, we had 2 children that have done quite well, and he and I are very good friends. But I love the Omegas because even once I became Omega Sweetheart, even when I graduated, those first several years, Freddie and Michael, when I would come back home to Indianapolis, they would find out that I was there and they would come see me or take me out. Those are the kind of relationships that I formed at Ball State. I've only been here one time because now I live in Miami, Florida, one time since in these 40-something years. So I won't recognize some of you all, and you probably don't recognize me. But I remember the names, and I remember you well. And I just thank you so much for wrapping your arms around me, including the Omegas that were so close and so wonderful to me, even after I graduated. And I just loved Ball State because of the people and what it did for me and helped me to grow up, establish a great foundation. I love this university. It was good for me, but it's the people that make the university, and I absolutely love it, and I thank you.
Okay, we're going to take probably just a couple more people. This young lady with her hand up with a, right, you. Come on up. I haven't. I just want to, yeah. All right, gentlemen. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sue Carol Miller, and I graduated from Ball State in 1956. And I wanted to say that especially because as I look around at all of you, I know that I am among, if not the only, oldest graduate here. I have been here before, and my husband and I came down to Ball State when I did my 50th reunion from Ball State. And I had a cousin who encouraged me this time, Nancy Price, to come to our reunion this time. And I want to say this. I was from a very poor family in Indianapolis. There were 4 children, a brother and 3 girls. But I want you to know that my father, who was a custodian, educated all 3 of his girls. And my brother got his education in the Army. My oldest sister, who was an AKA, graduated from Butler University. And I heard someone say at one time Butler only had 10 students. She probably was in that 10. My other sister, who graduated from Illinois University, and she was a Delta. I meant to bring my Delta bag with me because I am also a Delta of 63 years. And I want to tell you where I came from, one of the finest high schools in Indianapolis, and that was Crispus Attucks High School. And if you know the history of my school, we were developed with the Ku Klux Klan. They didn't want us going to Shortridge and to Broad Ripple and to Tech. At my time, however, my husband will tell you that his father went to Tech years and years ago before you guys were even thought of. But they built Crispus Attucks High School for us. They didn't want us going with their white daughters and their white sons. And so I came after my brothers and sisters to the finest high school in Indianapolis. And I say that because when they developed the staff, those teachers were brought from the South, black teachers, and they had their doctorate and their masters and all kinds of educational degrees in English, in math, in science. They came and were there to teach us. So when I left Crispus Attucks in 1950, I had the education of a young black woman, well-trained and ready with learning skills to go into a college. My first year, I went to Butler University for 1 year. At that time, I don't know how many blacks they were accepting, but I was one. My second year, I wanted to come to Ball State, and I did. But in between that time, I was made into Delta Sigma Theta sorority in 1952, and I've been a member for 63 years. I am so proud of that, because when I came to Ball State, the chapter came on campus in 1953. I came in 1954. And I brought those skills of a sorority woman, also a woman who knew she had to get through Ball State, and I came for business. And when I came, my girlfriends were here. Louise Jones, Catherine Miller, who was the founder of the chapter, Delta's chapter, on campus, right here at Ball State. Those girls had set up a system for me, and they were waiting for me to come down as a Delta to be a part of the group. But I want to say this, when I came to Ball State, I knew what I was about. I knew I had to study because I knew my dad was not out there working for me if I was going to come down here and play bridge. I didn't learn bridge until this year in a senior resident, and I'm 84 now. So I just learned to play bridge this past year. But I came to Ball State with study skills, and I knew what I had to do. And someone mentioned Ball State being on the quarter system. It was that when I came. And I loved it because we were not in those classes from September to January. We had that middle, those 1, 2, 3 breaks, and it made our classes a lot easier for us. And listen, I'm so old, I don't remember all of the staff. I can't remember anybody that just hit me as special, with the exception of the Dean of Women. And I don't even remember her name, but she was so great to the sorority, the black students that were here. And fraternities, the Kappas were here as well. Yeah, can you remember her name? Martha Wickham. You just had to say that name, and she came to me. But we had friends that were, and black girls that were here lived at Lucina Hall. And when I came, I lived in the city on South Grant. But that was because my dad couldn't afford Lucina Hall. But it doesn't mean that blacks were not in Lucina Hall, because they were. But I lived on South Grant with Mr. and Mrs. Keys, and they kept me for my whole period here. I want to say this. I graduated in 56. And also somebody mentioned doing student teaching. They had a school here on Ball State campus. And that's where I did my, yes, what was it?
Burris.
Yes, that's where I did my student teaching. And it was a wonderful school. When I came out, I graduated. I want to say this too. I was married in my senior year against my parents' wishes. But I married a very fine man. And he's sitting back there with holding his head because he, and I've been married. We will be married 61 years in December. So I came out and went on to finish my master's at IU University in '67. I went back and got my master's. But Ball State was my Christmas Adams High School was my foundation. Ball State picked me up and carried me for my 3 years that I needed to be here. I want to say this, that I retired from teaching in 1970. I got my master's in 76. I retired in 1994 from teaching, and I had put in 37 and a half years. I was in elementary, and I loved it. In those days, teachers loved their jobs. We loved teaching those children, and they were well behaved, parents were good, and we knew what we had to do in that classroom with those children. So I was an elementary grade teacher. And I want to say I knew Pasetta Trice because who mentioned her name? Someone said they knew Pasetta? Yes. She, of course, is very active at home in the sorority, and she was the chair director of our regional this year in Indianapolis, here in June. So I want to say to you, Ball State was a great school then as a teacher's college. Now, as a university, it's even better. And I would encourage anyone's child to come here because I knew that I had gotten a fine education. Thank you so much.
All right. Ms. Miller, if you get an opportunity before you leave, in one of the booklets on the corner over there, we have the photos of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority from 1953, 54, 55, 58, and 59. Okay, thank you. All right, there's some folks on this side that I apologize if you think I've ignored you. I haven't. I've just been trying to dance around the room. Yes, ma'am. Who else back there in that side? Okay. Michael? You're pointing at you. Okay. Leola? Yeah, hold him up high because I can't tell. Okay. Okay. Michael, then Leola, and Michael. All right.
My name is Dr. Ruby Kane, and I actually did my Doctor of Education here at Ball State and graduated in 2009. I had on my dissertation committee 3 African-American professors, Dr. Charles Payne, Dr. Lisa Meriwether Hun, and Dr. Sheila Smith. 2 of them are still here. A year after I graduated, I was hired here. So I am currently assistant professor of adult and community education, director of 2 master degree programs and 2 graduate certificates. And I'm very proud to say that our students, 30%, are students of color. We have one of the most culturally diverse degree programs on campus. I was also a part of the Black Graduate Student Association. At that time, Dr. Linda Keys was our academic advisor. And there wasn't very many African Americans in our degree program. I think maybe just one other person at the time that I was, actually no, she was in the master degree program while I was in the doctorate program. So I was the only African American. We did have 2 Africans who were in our degree program. And it was difficult to find individuals who would mentor us from an Afrocentric perspective. So that was why the individuals on my dissertation committee were extremely important. Dr. Charles Payne is, for those of you who know him, I mean, he is absolutely a model mentor for many, many students and also employees at Ball State. He's now retired, but he is he's still my mentor, and we still work together in the community when we can. I was a commuter student. I lived in Fort Wayne, so worked during the day, came at night to take my classes for the doctorate in adult higher and community education. And when I was working on my dissertation, I took time off, a week here, a couple of weeks there, in order to stay on campus. And I would stay in the Student Center Hotel. And I realized how much I miss not being a resident student, not being a campus student. I was able to immerse myself more in the college experience, to go to the lectures of, world-renowned speakers and individuals interested in issues of disparities by race, which was what my dissertation was on. And I am very excited that I received my degree from Ball State, because it's one of only two that include adult and community education together across the United States. And I'm even more honored that I am able to recruit within that same degree program and bring others to that experience. This is my first time being at an alumni event. So proud to meet all of you who trailblazed the way, and I'd just like to let you know there are more coming, and we are happy to stand on your shoulders. Thank you.
All right. Michael Falker. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Falker. I'm a 1980 graduate of Ball State University. I came here to Ball State. I was born and raised in Anderson, Indiana. And in Anderson, Indiana, the only thing they knew was graduate from high school, go to work at General Motors. No questions asked. At the last minute, I decided I wanted to go to school. Everybody was saying, you got to go to school, got to go to school. So I decided to go to school, got accepted here at Ball State. Feel like I got a very, very good education. I studied, my degree is in criminal justice and sociology. I wanted to go to law school, but then I found out the black prison system, the prison system had so many black people involved that I was really turned off from becoming a lawyer. And I got a real good job. I kind of worked my way through school. My dear mother was a 1940 graduate of Vashon High School in St. Louis, Missouri, and she was a registered nurse. My father passed away when I was 11 years old, so she pretty much raised the 5 brothers and sisters of us by herself. But I feel like here at Ball State I had a really, really good education. I mentioned that about my dear mother because she really kind of molded me and taught me the basic skills of life. I feel like I got a really good education. The thing that I really enjoyed most about Ball State is meeting all the people that I have met and the friends that I developed here. I'm a lifetime member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, fully involved with the Omegas. I publish a magazine now. I retired from AT&T in 2010. And I publish a national magazine now. I know all your national leaders of all the different fraternities and sororities, the AKs, the Deltas, the Omegas, the Kappas, Phi Beta Sigma. I know them all personally. We went to Washington, D.C., and I'll make sure you get a copy of my magazine before you leave this weekend. I do have some copies with me. And it's just been a really positive experience. Life has really been good. I'm truly blessed. Tomorrow morning, I'm working with a young protege that I mentioned it last night. He is in the final rounds of the Apollo Theater, and you're going to get a really good treat tomorrow morning. Aside from your breakfast, we have a gentleman by the name of Brian Thompson. I call him my 5th son. I have 5 sons altogether, and him being my 5th. All four of my boys went to HBCUs. My two oldest sons played football at Tennessee State. My third son just graduated last week from Tuskegee. And then my youngest son is a student at Howard. So I stay pretty busy. But I just say that because I'm truly blessed. And thank you so much for the opportunity. And have a good day.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Leola?
Leola Williams, 1973, MS in Education. I retired from teaching and from McGraw-Hill Textbook Publishing Company. I started at Butler University, and that year they didn't get their quota of 10. I was the only black girl on campus, and the only other black male on campus was African, and back then they didn't associate with us. So I went home after the first semester, and I told my mom, I cannot stay here. I've got to go somewhere else. And so we decided that Ball State would be the school because we had two neighbors that were friends of mine that were at Ball State at the time. But by the time I got there, they had both flunked out and never returned. So when I came to Ball State, it was the most devastating thing was the racism. The racism that I experienced at Ball State has really shaped my life in many ways. Of course, you know, we always know we have to be 10 times better. And I worked for 23 years for the largest textbook publishing company in the country. And so a lot of having to deal with the racism here helped me to deal with it on my job. When I came to Ball State, there was a senior, I can't think of her last name, by the name of Tony. I was really shy and sort of Sandy's opposite. I was really shy and quiet, and Tony kind of mothered me almost. And she took me to the window one day at the dorm, and she says, "You see, you are so sweet. You are going to change, but don't change too much. You see those two smokestacks?" I say, "Yeah." She says, "For every virgin that graduates from Ball State, they put up a smokestack." And so I came back to this reunion to see if they put my smokestack up.
Hello, my name is Mike Chisley. Oh, hey, there's Carl. John Hall too. Okay. I'm want to pass out some accolades while I'm up here. My story is in the Ball State Library, and because of Al Williams, who's I guess he's our official historian. He got like 20-some people that the university interviewed and put in the library, and so I'm not going to tell my story because if you want to see it, it's in the library. But if it wasn't for people like, and I need to pass these accolades, like Linda Wilson, who started the Alumni Association. People, you know, the youngins, you really don't know what all went on. And it's important to tell our story instead of his story. Our story, because of people like Linda getting the Alumni Association together, Al being the historian, keeping all the books and everything on everybody that passed through the university. Me and my wife we do genealogy. And by doing genealogy, you learn things that you know, like Big Mama used to tell you, well, it might not have been so, okay? Like all the Indians that are in your family, okay? But the point is that it is your story. These youngins need to understand their story, our story. instead of them running around, wilding out, doing crazy things, which a lot of y'all did when y'all were down here. I didn't because I was shy and timid. But if it wasn't for my ride or die that's with me and has been with me for the last 45 years, I don't, and the people that came before me at the university and the people that took me under their wings while I was here at the university and my parents, I might have been out here like some of these youngsters are doing. Dr. Morris, her tutelage on being the president of the Alumni Association and being my babysitter when I was growing up. But the whole point I really want to say is that the university did a lot of good things for me while I was here. We made some monumental changes here at the university. If you don't remember, how many people remember the old library and the reading room? Okay. Now, that was supposed to be where y'all were supposed to go and read. But before I left here, it was no longer a reading room. It was a gathering place. And there's one particular episode. They had my senior year down here that summer. We were all in the reading room, gathering, talking loud, being boisterous, which you weren't supposed to do. But they had a graduate student come through there, and he didn't know no better. And he came through there, and everybody's talking, being loud. Even the white students, that was a gathering place for them too. Wasn't just us. He came in and tried to shush us. Shh. He got called everything but a child of God by everybody in there, because he didn't realize that was not a reading room. That was a gathering place, a focal place on campus that everybody came to hang out. That was one of the things that y'all changed while y'all were here on campus. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to thank everyone who's attended this morning, and especially thank those who've offered their perspective on so many different aspects of Ball State. It really is important what you have shared with us. It becomes part of our archives. It is part of our legacy here at Ball State, and it is very, very important that we continue to do these kinds of things and have these kinds of events to just educate and inform. As part of a Black History program that I did earlier this year, the theme was education, celebration, and inspiration. And that's what we try to do, I think, within the Black Alumni Constituent Society. We try to educate, we try to inform, make people aware and knowledgeable of what we're doing, what we're about, what our objectives are, and what our goals are. And then from there, we celebrate that. And then hopefully we inspire. The university has undergone quite a few changes over the years. As a former president of the Alumni Association, I wrote an article in the Alumnus a few years ago, and I made commentary about the postures that we took as students, as African American students, during the periods of the mid to late 60s and early 70s. And the commentary was simply how naive we were to think that Ball State University had all of the answers when no one in the entire country had the answers. We were very naive. Ball State was not prepared, and we assumed, we had expectations of them to a certain extent that they were not prepared for. And so part of what we did was to educate and inform and help transition them into a new era. And with that, they brought broader vision, they brought broader engagement, and there has been change in the university over the years. Are we complete? No, we're not complete. There is still work to be done. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say, one, that you all were part of that catalyst for that change, and you did make a difference. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't say that the university did respond in many, many ways in hearing what you said and recognizing what needed to be done. And for that, that provides an opportunity for us to continue to propel forward. And that's what we're all about. We want to propel forward. We want to continue to reach out to broaden the enrollment with African American students, increase their retention rates, have them have greater successes, and be a part of the overall growth of the university. It doesn't have to always be African American focus, but there's an opportunity for us, and we need to have people coming back and participating and making a difference. And as I said earlier, all for just a few minutes of time. Someone mentioned the fact of being a mentor last night. I think Linda brought that up. That's something that could really make a difference. Because if you go over to the multicultural office, they don't see a lot of us. They don't see a lot of us coming back or coming through and participating and talking with them. I know that because I go there and they tell me that. You know, so we're looking to do some more innovative type things with the students on campus to make ourselves more relevant in their eyes, and hopefully in doing those kinds of things we can accelerate the bridging of that gap. So again, thank you all very much. We'd like to thank the camera crew for taking the time, the additional time to spend with us. Hope you enjoy the rest of the reunion. And Ms. Teresa would like to make a comment.
Quickly, for those of you who had an opportunity to speak this morning, the Teleplex Communications Department needs for you to fill out the consent form because it's videotaped, and so you're on it. And if you didn't get a form from me, the form is back there on the table. If you did not give your form back to me, you can put the form on the table back there. Yes.
All right. All right. All right.
I'd like to give Al a hand. Let's give him a hand for a job well done and his historian as par excellence. Thank you so much, Al, for really facilitating this as well.
I would like to make one additional announcement. Dr. Michael Doyle is going to be continuing his oral history interviews, I believe, in 2017. So there will be another opportunity for people to speak. Hopefully we'll have more input in the direction of some of those questions and some of the objectives associated with that. But hopefully we'll be able to do that again and continue to add. If you have information, if you have photos, you have anything that you'd like to contribute to our archives, by all means, just contact me and we'll get it digitized, copied, whatever is necessary, and have it added in. So again, thank you all for coming. Enjoy lunch.